Good evening, everyone. Bonsoir tout le monde. Welcome to our regular council meeting for December 5th, 2022. We'll get the agenda started. Item 1, roll call. All members of council are present and accounted for. Item 2, déclaration de reconnaissance territoriale et moment de réflexion. Territorial land acknowledgement and moment of reflection followed by the national anthem. I'll ask everyone to stand, please.
We acknowledge that we are on the unceded territory of the Anishinaabe and the traditional lands of the Haudenosaunee, Huron-Wendat, and Kanyen-Kahaka people. Nous reconnaissons notre obligation commune de respecter, d'honorer et de préserver ces terres et les ressources naturelles qu'elles contiennent.
Whereas Canada is founded upon principles that recognize the supremacy of God and the rule of law, let us take a moment of personal reflection.
Quand ton bras sait porter l'épée, il sait porter la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Oh, Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, everyone. Merci beaucoup. Item 4, additions, deletions, or amendments. We have one removal, a deletion. We're removing item 11B and the corresponding bylaw. Anything to add for members of council? I believe Councillor Lorrain
Yeah, I'd just like to add something at council member items number,
would be A.
where is it, 18A?
Yep.
Just regarding snow removal and salting for the streets
Insulting.
in the municipality.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Any other additions, members of council? Seeing, hearing none. Okay, so we'll move to item 5, adoption de l'ordre du jour. Motion d'adopter l'ordre du jour tel que amendé. Besoin d'un proposeur puis un appuyeur, s'il vous plaît. Proposé, Councillor Deakin, seconded by Councillor Tarnowski. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Merci beaucoup. Déclaration d'intérêt pécuniaire, declaration of pecuniary interest. Seeing, hearing none. Item 7, adoption of minutes, regular council minutes of November 21st, 2022, and the special council minutes of November 29th, 2022. Motion to approve the following minutes as presented. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Lalonde. Questions, comments on the minutes? Hearing, seeing none. All those in favor? Carried. Item 8, présentation. Il n'y a pas. Delegations. Item 9. Delegation presented by Debra Bourne, speaking in Russell. Hi, Debra. I'll invite you to come up to the lectern. And we'll bring up the delegation on the screen. Good evening.
Hi, can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and councillors. My name is Debra Bourne. I live at 93 Craig Street. We are here this evening to present to council a list of grave concerns from the residents of Craig Street to make you clearly aware of our situation. It should be noted that although this initiative began as a movement from the residents of Craig Street, Very soon it became apparent this issue is invasive throughout the village, as our group was approached by residents from Old Town, Forest Road, Concession, Central Park, Twilight, Church, Castor, Eby, Wade, and Louts. Unquestionably, there is clearly an issue with the management of traffic within the village, one which has literally persisted for years and has been ignored, shuffled about within the various levels of government and enforcement, and remains unresolved. Posting 40-kilometer-per-hour signs is a step in the right direction. However, without traffic calming, the excessive speeding will continue. A group of concerned citizens have come together, residents of Russell, to seek a positive resolution and petition for obviously required changes to ensure there is safety and property security for the Russell residents. That is stated as a paramount value point within the Master Transportation Plan. Craig Street is a county road, and it is my understanding that for any changes, our council and mayor are required to present resolutions to United Counties of Prescott-Russell for approval. Craig Street is a county road that travels from Concession to boundary Gregoire Victoria Street, of which the largest number of structures are homes. For approximately 1 kilometer of this roadway, many residences are fronted to Craig Street with access from their driveways to Craig. Many of these driveways are short, with limited options for safe sightlines due to 2 curves in the road or maneuvering to enter or exit their property. There are 8 roads that intersect with Craig, 9 access points from various businesses, and in addition, 45 residential driveways where individuals must exit and enter. The following is a list of comments from the residents along this travelway. When cars accelerate on Craig after turning from Concession, the level of aggressive acceleration is unacceptable. Exiting or entering my driveway is a challenge with speeding cars, and it is unsafe. The volume of heavy truck traffic, the hours of access, and the speed of heavy truck traffic is unacceptable. The shaking of the houses from these trucks is unacceptable. Crossing Craig Street from Mill Street to the sidewalks presents sightline issues for both drivers and pedestrians due to the curve of the road and clearly is unsafe. The acceleration of traffic traveling west towards Boundary Road, starting at Tim Hortons in anticipation of the 80 kilometers per hour just after Hamilton Road is unacceptable. The width of the road allowance and sidewalk from Parklands to Forest Road is much narrower than the rest of Craig Street. For pedestrians walking on the sidewalk or parents with small children, the sidewalk is approximately 24 inches from the road in some places. If someone needs to pass on the sidewalk in some areas, an individual has to step off the sidewalk onto the very small shoulder close to the road. This is unsafe. The exit from the new sidewalk at Parklands and Craigs goes right into traffic for individuals that have strollers or wagons. This is unsafe. The results of 4 speed tests have shown that over 50% of drivers speed. This is unacceptable. On the United Counties of Prescott-Russell website, the 85th percentile of their speed test in 2021 in the 50-kilometer zone was 76. This is just west of Tim Hortons. This is unacceptable. Enforcement. One would have to come to the conclusion there is a systemic failure within the province and certainly in Russell as to speed and traffic enforcement. We as a group, and many of us individually, have contacted both the municipality and the OPP regarding speeding and other traffic concerns. The municipality has continually referred all of the traffic speeding issues to the OPP. After several phone calls and emails, the OPP has stated they are not in a position to enforce due to personnel issues, and that aside, they are not prepared to enforce the laws as written, but will apply arbitrary selective enforcement at the discretion of the officer on duty. In other words, 50 kilometers per hour is not the speed limit, regardless of what is posted. Anything less than 16 kilometers per hour over the posted speed limit will not be enforced, including in school zones. We define this as policing by opinion, not by written law. The following is a portion of an email received from a constable of the OPP. I quote, "In addition, the threshold for speeding for every officer is different, and it is up to the officer to make the decision whether or not he or she decides to stop the vehicle, give a warning, issue a reduced provincial offense, or issue a non-reduced ticket. As far as issuing tickets at such low speeds, you could keep requesting a speed camera from your local mayor in hopes of reducing speeding motorists, unquote. The official complaints of traffic concerns received by the OPP will eventually come back to the township, so appropriately addressing them now is effective and efficient. This is what we were told by the OPP. A meeting with 3 members of our group and Mr. Jonathan Bourne, the Executive Director of Infrastructure of the Township of Russell, was held in order to make Mr. Bourne fully aware of our concerns. Mr. Bourne informed us during the sewer work between Mill and Confessional on Craig Street, a new pedestrian crossing at Russell Public School, extending the sidewalk on the north side of Craig Street by the park, and bump outs for traffic calming will be done. We have requested a public consultation with regard to the planned changes to this work on Craig. In addition on Craig, from Mill to Forest, there will be additional road work done for drains with repaving. We ask, are there any physical or visual traffic calmings that can be done at the same time on this section of Craig? With the 32-unit apartment at 106 Craig now under construction and the continued development in Russell, the traffic and the associated issues aforementioned will only increase. Given the above facts and given the admission by the OPP they cannot and basically will not effectively manage the situation, we require our elected officials to lead the way with required changes as we are asking with the following list. 40 kilometers per hour. Make Craig Street a 40-kilometer zone permanently. Currently, it's during school hours in that area. Installation of traffic calming that has been proven to change drivers' behavior. A community safety zone near the school. Photo radar, which is a singular, clear solution. Since this traffic problem is not just a Township of Russell problem, as we were told by Jonathan, a shared speed radar camera with the school zones within the UCPR, which auto-issues speeding tickets at the 10-kilometer-per-hour plus over the speed limit, would be very helpful. For the 2023 Craig Street plan, we would like to engage public consultation in that. We would like traffic calming measures to be added. Jonathan, as a civil engineer, would know all about those. Russell Public Schools should be approached in regards to safety concerns. The plan should be forward-thinking and should consider accommodating additional measures that could be possible in the future if trucks are eventually routed around the village, such as speed humps. In addition, the council should explore the steps needed to reroute through traffic around the village core. It is my understanding this was looked into several years ago and then nothing. It is important to look to the future for the safety and the security of the Russell residents. This is unfortunately a complaint-driven society, and we can become numb to the words. No one will ever admit to not listening or not validating residents' concerns. However, it's obvious in the past and recent communications that this is occurring. Respectfully, now is the time for Russell to show leadership. Leadership that will use the words can instead of can't, will instead of won't, vision instead of blindness, creativity instead of the status quo. These matters brought to you today are urgent. The residents of Craig Street are very frustrated. I can tell you that there are other residents very frustrated as well. Our expectation is by the next council meeting there will be resolution from the staff to approve and be presented at the next UCPR. Our expectation is we will receive written notification of the public consultation of the road work that's going to tender. Our expectation is that if there's any traffic safety issues that can be solved at the township level without council approval, they will be done forthwith. Our expectation is that if there's any traffic safety issues that can be solved at the township level that require council approval, they will be on the agenda of the next council meeting. Safety in a community comes right after the roof over your head. Safety is a human need, and it's a deficiency if we do not feel safe. Thank you for listening. The resolutions that need to be prepared for this council to approve to the mayor to take to UCPR, I understand will be prepared by Jonathan Bourne. Mr. Mayor, if a presentation is allowed from the public at UCPR, we will present. A few years ago, we were named as the 3rd best place to live in Canada. Let's not be complacent.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And thank you for taking the time to come to meet with me. I believe you, as you mentioned, you met with Mr. Bourgon. I believe you probably met with members of council already. As indicated at that meeting, anytime there's a delegation as per our procedural bylaw, there's no decisions that are made at this evening. But I open the floor to members of council if they have any questions or comments at this point in time. Councillor Tarnowski?
Thank you very much for a very detailed presentation and information that came with the presentation. I just wanted to, congratulate taking leadership on that. I think it is an issue. You're bringing up an important issue. We certainly will be discussing this. I think we'll put it forth to get some sort of resolution from staff on how we can go forward. I know we have processes and so on. I think it's important that we do have that consultation, or certainly have a process where the residents that are most impacted by this should know what's happening and what's going on. So there are a lot of rules and regulations around this that need to be followed, but we certainly congratulations on bringing this up. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Deakin and then Conseiller Larin.
I just want to echo my gratitude for your presentation this evening. It was so well prepared, and as somebody who works in a field that's all about hearing those firsthand perspectives, I'm really grateful for the depth, really, of storytelling that you've done here tonight in terms of the experience of living on Craig Street, and I'm eager to see what staff is able to prepare in terms of resolutions. Thank you.
Conseiller Larin.
Yeah, I think I thank you as well for coming tonight, and everyone else who came tonight to hear that. I think there are some of those items that you mentioned in your report would be budgetary items that we need to discuss. So the timing, I think, is well placed, considering we have our public consultation meeting next week. I'm going to suggest that we direct staff to take into consideration some of the items that were requested as public requests from this meeting, and bring them forward, so you don't have to come back next Monday night and re-ask for certain capital items or whatnot. So I just wanted to make sure that council was in agreement of that, and ensuring that the public request does go to that. Like Councillor Tarnowski said, there are definitely procedures that we have to follow. An expectation for the next meeting is probably not realistic, just based on the way things go. We need a report. We're going to need a report from staff. We're going to need to know what all of that looks like, and then of course it's probably going to come to budget, whether it's operational or capital. So. I look forward to seeing that information and moving forward from there.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Tarnowski?
And just a point of clarification, in terms of next steps, I'm just wondering, is it possible for us to request from staff to ensure that there is some sort of open house where we can discuss the plans for that road in terms of the upcoming construction, just to see what the options are, and just to make sure that we're communicating that information?
So normally in this type of delegation request, we would give a direction to the administration to bring back a report to council in regards to the items listed on this petition, so that and that way we can have further discussion on a line by line item as to what the staff's thoughts are on there and where council wants to go with that. Mr. Fawn and Monsieur Bourgon.
Monsieur Mass, I was going to add, it was our plan, staff, to present that to the resident, to present the project timeline of construction, but that was the intent of our original communication. If council want us to provide more, consult more, well, that could be part of my report for further direction from council. Yeah.
So I think for me personally, I would like to see the report that addresses these concerns, to let us know what is in the realm of possibility, what is not possible. As you mentioned previously, there is some road work being done. So, as I like to know the difference, it cannot be done, or we're not recommending. That's two different things, right? And what's in the realm of council's responsibilities as far as that goes. But I think, the going direction with the report is, I think, council is looking for that. Councillor Lalonde?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Mayor. I want to thank you, too, for the report. I think it was, you've obviously done a lot of background work on that, and we had a chance to meet as well, and I appreciate, the hard work that went into it. As someone who lives close to that corner, and I've been there for 40 years now, so I've gotten to watch the traffic and the growth, all of that take place, and certainly I share a number of the concerns. We have those same issues out in front of our street, but I think, like the rest of the councillors said, I think we owe it to Jonathan's group to bring forward some ideas on this and some suggestions. I would just like to maybe make the point that we should take many of those concerns seriously. I think they are quite legitimate. I've experienced a lot of that myself, trying to navigate that street, but it's a question of, what can be done legally or otherwise, and I look forward to having a debate with, on the basis of staff bringing something back and then us having a chance to look at that as well. So thanks very much.
Thank you. Conseiller Laurent?
Yeah, just to add on your point, Mr. Mayor, is in the direction to staff is in the report coming back to us. I think it should also suggest not just what they recommend, what not recommend, but also how do we go about, if it's not in our purview and it's to the UCPR, what steps do we need to take to advance that at that table? So I think that has to be part of that discussion as well.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Anything to add from the administration? Nope.
May I ask one?
Yeah, go ahead.
Just from a timeline perspective, I know there's a lot of rules, I know all those things.
Yeah.
So I don't know, when a report comes back to you, I don't know how that works.
Yeah, so timing-wise, I would anticipate that it would be at our January meeting. Mr. Fonin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there's a number of steps that we go through. There'll be the open house for the budget discussions, of which this will form one of those items that will be, I hate to say the word, but it'll be in competition with other priorities throughout the township. So we'll come to council for discussions about the budget in mid-February.
Right.
For anything that has a costing to it, things that we will do with UCPR support or going to other stakeholders that don't cost anything, we can start that now. So you should be able to get a report, depending on how much research has to be done, hopefully by early January. And then we go forward with prioritizing this in relation to other priorities. And then council will make a decision on where this fits in their priorities.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much. Anything else, members of council? The only item I did see in the presentation was, let me just bring it up. So I did see that you had a retired OPP officer who calibrated the gun, who was involved in traffic enforcement, if I understand. Would it be possible to send me his contact information? I'd love to have a conversation with him and just get, some feedback from him as well. So, perfect. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next item on the agenda. Yeah, well, it's a consent item, so. Next item on the agenda is the consent items. So it'll be motion that all items listed in our consent items be received as presented. We have A, the declaration from LFPR, Maison Interlude, White Ribbon Campaign, which I'll read a statement. Item B, which is the request for community grants from Parks and Recreation Department for the 2022 budget. And item C, the minutes of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee of October 20th, 2022. So I'll just bring up the declaration. So November 25th to December 10th are known as the 16 days of activism against gender violence. These days of activism are celebrated across Canada and include the National Day of Remembrance and Action on Violence Against Women on December 6th, as a sad reminder of the École Polytechnique de Montréal massacre in which 14 young women lost their lives. This year, Maison Interlude House, in collaboration with Leadership Féminin Prescott-Russell, invite all municipal councils within the United Counties of Prescott and Russell to take part in the White Ribbon Awareness Campaign as a way to participate in the 16 days of activism. The White Ribbon Campaign is the world's largest movement of men and boys to end violence against women and girls and to promote gender equality, healthy relationships, and a new vision of masculinity. Wearing the white ribbon is a way for men to express their support in the fight against sexism and violence against women and girls. Thus, it is with great pride that our male elected officials are wearing the white ribbon today. Several other municipalities have followed suit, along with many community partners, in support of this campaign. From November 25th to December 10th, you may see men proudly wearing the ribbon. Violence against women is a social problem that does not spare our counties. Interlude House helps over 500 women in Eastern Ontario each year. Men must be part of the solution, and by wearing this ribbon, the elected officials of Russell Township are showing their support and solidarity in the fight against gender-based violence. With that, we'll move forward. Motion that all items are listed under the consent items be received as presented. I need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Conseiller Lalonde, seconded by Councillor Tonoski. All those in favor? All those opposed? Carried. Thank you very much. Item 11, rapport des départements et comités du conseil, complexe récréatif, présentation du plan conceptuel, recreation complex, conceptual design presentation, report PR 19-2022. The council receives report PR 19-2022 dated December 5th, 2022, and approve the conceptual plan of version 3 optimized plus rink 3, which will include 3 rinks, a 6-lane pool, a community hall, and common areas, estimated at a cost of between $82.3 million and $88.8 million. This should be a great discussion. So with that, I will open it up, and we have some guests. Mr. Fonin, Monsieur Godin, Madame Guittard. It's your show.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. Yes, I'm pleased to open up the presentation tonight. We do have some guests that traveled a long way today to be with us tonight. So Mr. Ray Lecary on my right, who's DPM for Turner and Townsend. He's not too far. He's from Ottawa, so that was good for him. But we also have Mr. Robert Allen at the far right. He's partner with MGMA, and also Mr. Mark Downing beside him. He's principal from MGMA. MGMA is our design consultant, and Mr. Ray Lecary is from our consultant, project consultant.
Okay.
So as you probably remember, back in September 8th, council had approved a project manager and a design team to be working on the recreation complex. And it was also mentioned during that evening that we would bring back a proposed concept, if you want, with maybe different options in December before the year end. So tonight is the night. So we've circulated our report on Thursday. So council had a chance to study the report and prepare some questions for our consultant tonight. So without any further ado, I will pass the floor to MGMA, to Robert and Mark, to go through their presentation. Afterwards, when we're done with that, I think, Mr. Mayor, if you don't mind, we could go through some questions for the presentation as we go through the presentation, if it's your wish.
Thank you, Madame Guittard. Welcome, Ray, Robert, Mark. Thank you for being here this evening. I think the best approach probably is to go slide by slide. So members of council, as we go through the process, if you have a question, let's raise it then and there while we're on that page. So that way, we're not holding everything till the end and then we're going back and forth all over the place. So with that, Mark, Robert.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor and members of council. It's a pleasure to be here on behalf of MGMA and JLR, your architects for this project. I just wanted to point out that Patrick from JLR is also here tonight with us. We're at the very beginning of our work, or our journey with you together, but we totally recognize that this project has been, you've been at work on this project for about a decade. And we're very respectful of all of that work that's happened. We also, understand, like many of the projects that we do, that this is an enormous capital expense for the town, and we're also very respectful of the issues of budget that surround this, and we are dedicated to delivering the best possible value for budget. And lastly, we really enjoy this building type that aggregates different kinds of programs, because we think that it actually makes for really amazing possibilities for a community hub for your community, and we've seen that in action in other communities. And just to say that that even the site for this building, we see great possibilities in integrating the assets, the community assets you already have in place with the new facility. So we're very excited to talk to you about that. We're also cognizant of the fact that we really need to balance the program with the budget, and that's one of the big issues tonight that we want to step through.
And on our way to doing that, just
Sorry, Mark, just speak a little bit closer to make sure it's webcast, so we want to make sure that the people at home are able to hear everything.
pardon me. How's
No,
that?
good. That's better. Thanks.
Okay, so on our way to explaining how we're going to do that, here's a high-level list of topics we want to cover with you tonight. So we are going to talk about the alignment of program and budget. We're going to talk about the building program that we were presented by you, and we think it's an exciting reflection of what this community needs. We're going to talk about the best way to achieve that. We're going to talk about what we call optimizing that program, which really means finding some efficiencies so that we can approach the target budget that you've presented us with. There is a section in here, too, where we want to talk a little bit about efficiency and sustainability. And that part of the presentation is a bit of a departure from the program and budget, but we will talk a little bit about that. And we would like, finally, to summarize what we've said tonight, but to talk to you about what comes next. So let's start with the alignment of building program and budget.
Oh, you were going to do this.
I'll do this one. So there's some good news, and there's some slightly less good news here, but generally speaking, from our perspective, the beginnings of these projects are always exciting, and we are going to find a way to make this project happen within the constraints of the budget you have. So the good news is that we understand that you're looking for about 180,000 square feet of building program, and that we'll talk in detail in a minute about what that encompasses. The good news is we think we can, with very little initial outlay, we can reduce the square footage of what you propose to us, thereby reducing the cost, so we can fit as much of the building program that you need onto the site that we've got. The slightly less good news is, as professional architects, we deal a lot with general contractors. We deal a lot with market conditions. And what we're seeing is that for a number of reasons, which include the harrowing stories of the past few years, COVID, market prices elevating, we're seeing that construction of this type is hovering at around $600 a square foot. We'll talk in a little more detail about that in a moment.
As Mark mentioned, we do a lot of these projects, and we have several of this project type ongoing. And we just wanted to say that, in a way, the validation of that $600 a square foot, the lower image is a project that was tendered quite recently. Very similar program to yours. A really nice municipal facility, durable, not a lot of bells and whistles, a really kind of functional and efficient building. A very similar program was tendered, so this is to be the market price at around $600. So we're using that as the basis for our discussions about how we can accommodate the program. So we also understand that there's a $75 million target. So when let's go to the next slide. So we started with the base program and really looked at each of the program components and figured out how we could optimize the space it took up without losing any functionality, And I think we've done, we've sort of taken a pass through that, and we will step through those with you. But one of the initial moves was just simply to look at doing the building primarily as a single floor building, which is what we would suggest no matter what approach we take. We think that is a proven sort of area saver in terms of circulation. It also is a great thing for accessibility, and it aggregates all the social functions, these great social functions on the same floor, and really makes for a dynamic space. So in this one, we literally, and we'll step through them, looked at taking what was a two-floor scheme in the indicative design and really making it a single floor, putting everything on the ground floor, and then having a mezzanine for the track and the sort of seating for one of the larger arenas. So we'll step through, and we think, you know, this fits well on the site. And as we look at these diagrams, these are definitely not designs. We are in what we call the pre-design phase. We are simply trying to figure out how much program can we accommodate given the budget cap, and how can we make that efficient and organized on the site.
So how might we do that? So when we say optimized program, what we're really doing is, like Rob says, we're stepping through each of the components of the building, and we're finding ways we can make those components operate more efficiently. An example might be, how can we make one space in your project do many things? So in the example of an arena, in your program, you're looking for potentially a number of ice pads, 2, possibly 3, understanding from your indicative design that you're also looking to expand to potentially a 4th in the distant future. But the arena space that's kind of driving the activity and excitement in the building is the one with spectator seating. So 750 spectators, how can we make that work? How can we make that work with a walking track? Well, this image shows, this is an example from a project that we did in Evanston, Illinois recently. We think this configuration works really well. All of the spectators in inclined seats along one side of the rink. This configuration appeared in your indicative design. It's a completely normal thing to do, and we think it was a smart move to put it in the indicative design like you did. And when we talk about making these spaces efficient, the building section of a space like that is filled with possibilities. You can use the space under the seats for change rooms, for refs rooms, for first aid, for admin spaces. There's a lot you can do underneath the spectator seats. The viewing of the ice surface from the walking track, which you can see at the top, is great viewing, great informal viewing. If you go back to the image with the walking track around the ice, you can imagine that being encircled by spectators for a bigger event. So there's a lot of efficiencies built into the scheme that you presented to us. And I'd like to just point out that, you know, an NHL-size rink has set dimensions. So we work as hard as we can to get those spaces to do many things, but ultimately we can't get much smaller. So we're going to try to make that space do as much as possible within what we think is a responsible but limited budget. Moving on to the other parts of the project, we're going to do the same thing with all the other components of the building.
So aquatics, certainly the more expensive end of the building program. First of all, you know, your indicative design was looking for 2 basins, a leisure basin and a lap basin, which we absolutely think is the absolute best thing. You can have 2 different water temperatures. The leisure pool, warmer water, great for parents and tots, great for seniors, great for aquafit. The lane pool, you know, obviously great for training, great for competition. So we think it's a really fantastic combination for the community. We've looked at it through a whole bunch of designs that we've done previously and found some efficiencies in the sort of size of the change rooms and the size of the natatorium that we're recommending. But just to be, and so our recommendation is that your indicative design had an 8-line lap pool. We're recommending that you drop it down to what we call a 6-lane competitive lap pool. So that's a 6-lane pool that would be built to FINA standards. You can run a meet, you can set a record in it. But the savings on the area really bring back a lot of savings to the building program. But you can still have spectator viewing, touch panels, and starting platforms. It's a facility typology that we've done many times. This is just a design from a previous project. The other thing that we just wanted to touch on was that, as we move into the future, we're going to be looking at how to organize the change rooms and, whether they would be all universal or family, male and female, or discussions that we want to have with you. But, we think that even inside the size that we're suggesting, you can have a fantastic, amazing community pool that serves everybody.
If we take a similar approach with the gymnasium, we've done a number of these as well, and really what drives the size of a gym is kind of your collective ambition for what sports you think you might play there. Yours appears to be sized for it's a versatile size that you presented in your indicative design. Looks like you could generously fit a basketball court, a volleyball court, maybe 2 pickleballs all overlapping. You also had some space for change rooms, actually quite a lot of space for change rooms in your indicative design. So for us, all of the schemes that we're showing you tonight, that we're about to show you, include the full square footage for the gym that you presented to us. This slide is on the screen just to suggest to you that if you, for whatever reason, could be a budget reason, if you needed the gym to be smaller, we've done plenty of gyms that are, and they're completely functional. Sometimes they're divisible, sometimes their program overlaps with other community programs. Completely reasonable thing to do to work with the size of the gym. But what you'll see from our illustrations tonight is the full program that you called for in the indicative design. And we'll say the same about the community hall. We've done a number of projects that distinguish between, say, multi-use space or gymnasium space and pure community halls. And we understand that this is an important and vibrant part of your community programming now. So you are going to get, in the designs you'll see tonight, I shouldn't say designs, in the schemes you'll see tonight, the full square footage allotment that you proposed in the indicative design. But I'd also like to point out that we have done projects before that seem to meet some of the needs that you've presented in less square footage. We're not proposing that to you tonight, but just for reference, a couple of community centers that came out of our office in the past had banquet facilities, had multi-use community space. Just for illustrative purposes, the image in the center is from a community center in North Kawartha with the ability to have a 300-person banquet, about half the size of what you're looking for in this indicative design. So just to point out, a community hall is another area where when we get involved in the detailed design, we will make sure that everything we're doing meets your needs. So, like I say, what you'll see from us tonight is the full square footage that you proposed in the indicative. So,
I was just
go
going
ahead.
to jump in and say, we're going to show a couple of versions of this that sort of take out different program components. But in all the versions we're showing you, which again are not designs, they can all be organized so that you can add any of the program components that you're not doing right now in the future, either in the near future or the far future. We'll build that into the DNA of whatever building we finally end up designing.
Thank you. Just check with members of council. Is there any questions at this point in time? Councillor Deacon?
Thank you for the walking track. I was just looking for clarification on whether the mezzanine, sort of the common area that you showed, would that have an elevator? Like, is that meant to be fully accessible? Because you kind of said you were trying to keep it to one floor, so.
So, yeah, when we say one floor, we're distinguishing between an actual separated second floor and a mezzanine. But the mezzanine definitely has an elevator. You have to get people up to the walking track. So it's actually a requirement under accessibility standards to make all the spaces of the project accessible to people with mobility limitations. So our proposal, when we say walking track as a mezzanine, we mean that it's open to the ice surface below, but absolutely there would be an elevator included.
Also just wanted to mention that I'm glad you brought up the track. Every single track that we've built in the last decade has been packed from the day the building opened. It's an extraordinary public use and a great community builder, and you just see, you know, anything from moms with strollers to seniors to joggers on them. It's they're an absolutely amazing piece of programming.
Yeah, I think we see that with our own track in our dome right away. Follow up, and then Councillor Tarnowski.
Thanks. Just quickly too, how is the track separated from the climate of the arena, or is it all integrated?
So on the majority of our projects, but not all, the track is open to the climate of the arena. And interestingly, the arena spaces do have what we call a stratified temperature, meaning that generally without really any particular effort, it's just, they're just warmer up higher than they are down below. So one of the interesting notes from having done this for 30 years is we have actually never received a complaint that the track was too cold. We get lots of complaints about other things. But the track generally, partly because people are moving around up there, and if they're not, let's say people are collecting up there because there's an exciting event on the ice and it's kind of like gallery viewing, the place just naturally warms up. So we don't generally go to any extraordinary effort to mitigate the climate of the walking track if it's open to the arena. Having said that, we do have projects where the upper levels are separated. And sometimes that's a program requirement. There might be other reasons to do that. We wouldn't necessarily recommend that for this project, but it's been done before.
Thank you. Councillor Tarnowski.
Just on that point, if you go to Smith Falls, they have that in Smith Falls, and it's beautiful walking track. And okay, I have a couple of questions. First of all, on the comparators that you used, the 625 was based on the lower end, and that's because it it's the one that really looks like this particular project. That's correct?
Yeah, the 600, the version, the lower one was, the two were only there to say that we literally do these and have multiple projects of this type ongoing. The closest one to your project in terms of program was the lower one, and that one, the market price of that was 600. So that's really the only reason that we had that slide, was just to indicate that we see all different kinds of these kinds of projects. The other thing is that the more expensive one, that had a higher pool. It had no arenas, and arenas are typically the least expensive component per square foot that you'll build. That higher level one had no arenas, had a larger aquatic center relative to the other programs, so its per square foot price was elevated. So it's a balance between the components and the size of the components.
Follow.
I've got a couple here. In the comparators, in the plan, you refer to environmental constructions to be used for the complex, which I applaud. I think that's great. I just wanted to check for the comparators, are they using the same specs? So that price that you're telling us, it's based like we're comparing apples with apples there.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
So, and it's worth noting, we'll talk a little bit about this in the sustainability portion of our presentation, but we are not really considering doing any buildings that don't have sustainability initiatives anymore. It's a professional commitment we make, and if this discussion never came up, we would still do everything we can to make this project sustainable.
Excellent. No, it was just more about the cost, making sure that we're comparing the same cost. That's great. In terms of your comments around the community hall, you've gone based on specs provided. You had a better term for that, but do you have recommendations at this point to say that we could reduce the square footage and still have an efficient 300-400 room? And when you say banquet, we're talking about rounds of 10 in terms of seating, like a dinner kind of thing?
You can have rounds of 10, or you can have kind of family-style long tables. we're not actually here to make any particular recommendations about reducing the size of the community hall. I'm pointing out only that we've done it before, but I think it seems to me that this is a kind of critical part of the building program. And I think what we really need to do is hear more from you eventually on what your needs are. In this section of the presentation coming up, you will see the full 12,000 square foot build out. If it becomes appropriate to talk about reducing the square footage, we can do that at another time.
Okay.
I think for now, I'm just pointing out that our initial study, the work we've done in the past couple of weeks, is just to try as hard as we can to find some efficiencies, but we aren't going to make any recommendations to you that we don't think are that we don't think would completely meet your needs.
Okay.
Last one, and then Councillor Lorrain.
Thank you. One last follow-up, and I don't know if it's for you, Monsieur Godin, more, but in terms of forecasting cost here, are we looking at future value dollars or current dollars, and does that make a difference? So if we're currently 5 to 8% inflation, so that 625 that we're looking at, should I be thinking in my head it's going to be closer to $700 in 2 years?
One of the reasons that we placed the range, because we're pretty far out from the project right now, so we want to have a range of costs so that could accommodate some cushion for things like escalation. Quite frankly, depending on who you talk to, you get quite a different story about whether the market will continue to escalate or flatten out. I've heard it from credible sources in both directions, so it's a bit of a moving target right now. But we're again, we feel the most confidence in numbers that are recent marketplace numbers, and that's why we're saying, hey, at the beginning, why don't we take this number because it's been validated by the market as they move forward, and give it a bit of a cushion on either side. And use that as the basis for the kind of having a contingency inside the numbers. But I also really forgot to mention, the project will be costed at numerous times during its development. So at the end of schematic design, it'll get a cost. At the end of design development, it'll get a few costings when it's in working drawing. So there will be many more opportunities to take a snapshot, and those snapshots become more and more detailed as we learn more and more about the geotechnical conditions on the site, and we learn more about the details. So we are really early, and there are many more checks and balances on the budget that are going to come.
Thank you. Councillor Lorrain.
Yeah, so I mean, we're only on this page right now, and we've got many more pages to go. But since there was a discussion happening, I figured I'd ask a question. I think I know the answer to it, but I want to make sure. So right now, it's essentially tonight, it's the direction of component, the whatever option that we decide to choose. Once that's done, then there will be time as we go to say, okay, well, we've chosen that the community center is part of this project based on one of the options that have been presented to us. Now, that specific item or component, can that now be split into 3 components? Like, will that room be able to be split into 3 to be able to be separated? That all comes at another time. Is that fair to say?
That's entirely correct.
Okay. So then that goes into the same thing with the design of the dressing rooms and all that stuff, correct?
Entirely correct. And
Okay.
that's why we're so careful to say we're not talking about a design today, because we
Okay.
don't have one. We have a space planning diagram
Right.
that has numbers associated with it. So for sure, an immense amount of work for us to collectively go through all of those spaces and describe them and design them with you and to meet the needs of the community.
Okay. So I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but the only thing I'll make the comment of is, so in option 1, because that's where we're looking at right now, I think we already went to that one. Well, maybe I went a little further down one page.
Oh, well, would you like, if you'd like, we can advance the presentation.
Well, it's just, the only thing I wanted to say was, on the next slide, it'll say 12 dressing rooms, but if it's 13 or if it's 11, that's at a later time, right? That's not going to change the project that much.
That's correct. We're dealing with square footages, and so we have some clients who want 10 dressing rooms because they want them a little larger, some who want a mix of sizes because they're looking at different genders that need to be accommodated on teams. All of that is stuff that we look forward to working with the
Okay.
town.
Absolutely. Thank you.
I think for those watching at home, probably the best explanation is we're looking at this building from 20,000 feet up. As we go to the 30, 60, 90, we'll be zooming in on the details to make sure that we're getting a better picture as we get further along the process. So, any other questions at this point? We can continue. Go ahead.
It's perfect timing. So you recall in the base program, we drew everything that you had asked for. We showed it at 166,000 square feet. We've talked about market price now. So we're here, this option one we're showing you, this is a suggestion to zero in on the target budget. So we thought that, as Rob says, these are feasible projects. We're might come and do an addition on this building in 5 years, 10 years. So these are all options. What we're showing you here is an attempt to hit that $75 million target. And we think, for example, you could do it by phasing the third rink in at another time, by phasing the bowling alley in at another time. And what you would have is a twin pad arena facility, 750 spectators and a walking track on one of those two pads, community hall, gym, and aquatics center. We think that based on the square footage, that project might zero in nicely on the target budget. And so that's the purpose of this. And like Rob says, it's not a design. This is a suggestion. Or if it emerges from this discussion that the most important thing is to hit $75 million, this is one possibility. There's another possibility here that we thought might be of interest. If it was important to build all of the ice surfaces at once and phase in some other building components to a later time, this is an option that phases in the gymnasium and the bowling hall for later, phases in rink 4 for later, keeps the 3 rinks, keeps the aquatic center, and keeps the community center. We think it's certainly an uptick from the target budget, but if ice is a priority, then I think this is a really good way to go. I'm sure we're all aware that building things in the distant future probably means that they'll cost more than they cost today. So if this option makes more sense for now, it's an interesting one to look at. I'll run through this part of the presentation as quickly as possible, and of course we're always open to questions on this. So sustainability actually did appear in your indicative design as a priority, and we fully agree. We agree as an office. We agree as a profession. The idea here is in a very short time, less than 10 years, we're committing to not having any greenhouse gas emissions in our buildings. That's an industry commitment, but we're seeing that commitment come from all sectors: construction industry, municipalities. We know it's if it isn't a priority now, it's going to become one really quickly. So we're going to do that on this project. And the question here is, if you can't build a zero carbon building now, how might you do it in the future?
So the great thing about your building, it has a lot of energy consumers and it has a lot of energy requirers. The great thing about an arena and a pool is that arenas are simply mechanisms to take heat from the floor, rink floor, and pools are basically places where you need to put heat to keep the water warm. So there's a kind of natural synergy in connecting those, and it's a little more sophisticated at the higher level, but at the basic, we can move heat around the building, and we have some heat demanders and we have some heat producers, which is awesome. In pools, we are looking at regenerative media filters, which reduce the amount of water that you use in the backwash system. We look at essentially what we call push-pull ventilation, which is a low-energy mechanism to deliver great ventilation in pools. We do high-performance glazing, and we look at how to use windows, which are traditionally the weak point in the building envelope, sparingly but effectively to get great lighting, non-glare-free lighting into the main spaces. And as Mark pointed out, we're really looking at all electric building systems, which include things like air source heat pumps to deliver. Lastly, I would say the great thing about pulling all these program pieces together in a single building is that we typically find clients' operational costs go down from delivering the same thing in 3 separate places.
So just wanted to put, because the overarching theme of all of this is the alignment of program and budget, wanted to have a slide here that just summarizes the options that we've presented. There's nothing on this slide that you haven't heard before, but just to point out how to kind of read the pink text there. The pink text under the first scheme, the optimized plus gym, is the thing we would change to get you down to the square footage that you're looking for. Same with the optimized plus rink. But this is just a summary of the data you've seen in other slides. Last thing we'll point out here is these projects always feel like they're happening with breathtaking speed, but actually they don't. They take years. And so just to point out, this slide focuses on the steps we need to go through to get the building designed. But really, the important thing here is we're targeting construction. That's why we're doing all of this. So the schedule you see here allows us around a year. To me, that doesn't sound like a lot of time, so it's great if we can be efficient, but we have time. And the idea here would be to tender the project in February of '24 so that you can be in the ground in spring of that year. We think it'll take around 2 years to build it. So generally speaking, we kind of try to work backwards from those dates to make sure we're hitting our internal targets so that you get there efficiently. We draw a beautiful contract so there's no doubt as to what ought to happen in the field when the contractors get their hands on it. This slide also points out, this is something that Rob mentioned earlier, but it's completely true. There are a lot of checks and balances in this process. We get the building costed 4 times. The PM that you've selected for this project is in fact a cost consultant. So as much as we would love it to keep things, moving efficiently, there will be many instances, many milestones along during the next year for us to take a breath, check the cost, make sure we're getting what we need.
Thank you very much. Other questions, comments, members of council? Councillor Tarnowski?
So I apologize in advance. I've got a few for Richard. Mr. Gaudet?
Okay, well, are they in regards to finances? We can wait till his financial presentation?
Sure, we can do that. Yeah, thank you.
In regards to Mark?
Yeah, thanks for all that. Just a couple of questions. I don't want to come down from the 20,000 feet onto the floor level, but nevertheless, when you're talking about that energy, the integrated thermal, I guess that brings with it the requirement for some unique skill set to manage that equipment. You're not just looking at someone at an arena who checks the ammonia levels from time to time. You're looking for an on-site resource full-time to be able to manage the requirements for that, never mind the pool piece as well.
It's a very good question, and I'm glad you asked it. One of the hallmarks of these kinds of buildings where you have a room that's got warm water in it and another room that's got ice in it is that the building automation system has to be very carefully scrutinized in order to get the maximum value for your dollar. And one of the things we try to tell clients early is that, it's not quite like running a starship, but it's kind of getting up there. Like that's actually a kind of really important position, the building operator for these facilities. And I think no matter what anyone's doing right now, like all the new building systems really require a lot of scrutiny, and they require a kind of talented operator. So I know we've actually mentioned it in some of our previous meetings that, not only do you need to ramp up in terms of thinking about how the building will be operated, but we also need to collectively ramp up the way that the building gets handed over to the client, so that that there is a kind of full set of operating instructions, and that the commissioning guys will be available to come back maybe for the first year or two, because these things take a lot of settling in, and if you get someone that's really good, man, they can really make them work awesome.
Just to follow up to that, I mean, when we're talking about talented people and the skill sets, I mean, are we possibly talking about an engineer type level of training and expertise to sit in there and manage that program?
I mean, it's interesting, typically the only place we used to have engineers was when you had unpackaged refrigeration plants over 60 horsepower, and so we've gotten around all that. The refrigeration plants that we would suggest don't require a B-class, a B-ticket engineer. I do think that, I don't know whether it's an engineering degree, but I think you need someone who has a great interest in facility with really wanting to kind of understand these beasts. It is a very complex, you have a series of complex environments, and to understand them and operate them, you just need someone who's really into it. I don't know how you put that on a job search application.
In fact, if I may, so I can add part of my expertise to this, in planning out the facility as you go forward, and when the facility is turned over, with it comes the documents, with it comes a great deal of training for the people that you're going to have operating the facility. So it would behoove you to go to the market at some point in the future to find an individual that can manage the facility and hire a staff to manage the whole facility. And that's right down to introducing preventive maintenance programs to make sure that you're getting best bang for your buck and ensure the life cycle of the equipment that you're going to be putting in place.
Thank you. Any other questions, comments at this point? No. Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Exciting times. Next, the meat and potatoes. I think this will be going to Monsieur Godin.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Maire. Bonsoir, chers membres du Conseil. And thank you, Robert and Mark, for that presentation. If it's okay, I'll stay at my place here at my computer.
Yeah, for sure.
We'll just go get the clicker, though, to manage the presentation. So for the next few slides, a couple things. I just want to update council on a financial plan. So I'll just start off with reminding council about the exact plan, how it was built, what was adopted, what it's looking like today, and what's coming up. And then I'll just be showing council over those three different versions that we saw Mark and Robert present, how they fit into that plan, and what, if any, additional measures would need to be taken for the municipality to make those plans and that project feasible. So to start off, I'm just going to recap on, there's three major components to our financial plan. First of all, taxation. So since, for the last 4 years, we've been increasing taxation towards this plan to be able to build up reserves and also to build up a yearly allocation that can be used to pay for the debt payments that will eventually come out of this, as well as pay for the operations of the facility. So since we've started, and earlier this year, Council adopted Bylaw 2245, which was a commitment to keep doing this until 2028. So every year, at budget time, we're allocating an extra $150,000 from growth-related revenues towards this reserve, and we're also increasing taxes by 1% to increase those contributions.
Councillor Lorraine.
Sorry, you're just one slide ahead.
Oh, sorry about that.
There you go.
Thank you. And so I just want to mention, I'll be saying a lot of numbers, and so if things get confusing or if I'm going too fast, don't hesitate to stop me and to ask your questions.
And just to confirm, this started in 2019, correct?
That's correct.
A
So we
10-year
started-
plan.
Exactly. We started this in 2019 with the goal of to continue it until 2028. So by 2028, in continuing with this plan, we'll have a reserve of about $16.4 million accumulated by those contributions. And also, and just as importantly, the yearly tax allocation by that time will be about $3.3 million. So that means we'll have $3.3 million in taxes going towards the operations, going towards debt payment, as well as satisfying our asset management needs. Right. So a second component to the financial plan is development charges. So we've been collecting development charges even longer than the tax allocation, and in continuing to do so, we're expecting that by 2028 we're going to have approximately $24.1 million available in DCs to be allocated towards this project. And again, as far as the yearly revenue from DCs that are projected, and this is based on our most recent DC study. We're expecting that in 2028, we're going to be collecting approximately $2.1 million in DCs for recreation, which we can use to make those debt payments.
Councillor Larray?
So it would be 24 as a total, and then 2.1 on a going forward?
That's correct.
Okay. So our going forward would be 3.3 plus the 2.1 to be about 5.4.
That's right.
Okay.
And the total amount that if we take both of those reserves in 2028, we're looking at about $40 million in
Upfront.
down payment, if you will.
As a
Yeah,
down payment.
Yeah, upfront.
Correct. Okay. Thank you.
So like we just saw in the presentation, $1 million is not going to be quite enough to complete this project. So there will be a debt component for the remaining requirement. So a few things on this slide, just to remind council, we do have a debt capacity. So we are legislated with a maximum of debt that we can incur. Our provincial maximum represents about 25% of our net revenues, and we also have our municipal debt policy, where we have a self-imposed limit of 15% of our net revenues. So what that means in numbers essentially is that by 2029, which is the year we're going to start making those debt payments, we should have a capacity within our own self limitations to borrow up to $61 million. And if we're looking strictly at the provincial limitations, so that will require an exemption to our municipal debt management policy, which shouldn't necessarily be done without a reasonable reason to do so. We are looking at about $112 million in debt capacity in 2029.
Questions at this point? Just to clarify, when we talk about in 2029, that's when the payments start. Just can you speak to why, if the construction is in 2020, if it is completed by 2026, why are we waiting a 3-year period?
Yeah, that's a great question. So just to summarize that, to explain that, so the plan is built in a way that we're going to keep on increasing taxes yearly until 2028. So in order to allow us to do so, and to not have payments to make that we can't afford in 2026 or 2027, we'll be having interim financing during the construction. So we do have access to what they call construction loans or interim financing, which is, if you want to compare it to your household, it's kind of like having a line of credit, right? So we borrow up to what we need during the construction. We're going to be able to pay it down as we collect more DCs and as we keep contributing to our reserves. So during that 5-year period, it's what we're calling interim financing. There will be interest costs associated to that, but it also has the flexibility to be able to keep raising those taxes and to keep collecting DCs to be able to make a larger down payment.
Councillor Tarnowski?
That kind of makes sense to me, but if I was building a house and I had the opportunity of going with a mortgage or a line of credit, the line of credit is typically a higher interest rate. Is that the same case for this bridge kind of financing? Or?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So no, in this instance, so our consultants for debt, if you will, We work a lot with Infrastructure Ontario, which is a provincial entity who help municipalities with financing. Construction loans are typically, they have a much lower interest costs or interest rates. With the latest increase in interest rates, that gap has shortened a bit, so the interim financing cost does go up a bit, but not to the point of a long-term debt. So that interest cost is lower than if we were to incur long-term debt right away.
Councillor Lorrain?
Yeah, just a clarification, it might just be the wording of what you said, is this allows us to raise taxes until 2029 when that comes in. It continues to allow us to maintain our current financial plan, which includes that 1% tax increase, not anything over and above that at this point in time, right?
Right, so through you, Mr. Mayor, that's correct.
Okay, I just wanted to be clear, because the way it was said, it just sounded like, well, we can just continue to raise taxes. Well, no, we've implemented a very strategic plan for this project, and we're just going to maintain that plan, not
Go above it.
going above.
That's correct. And,
Okay.
it also brings me to my next point that I wanted to make was our financial plan. So these tax increases and these DCs that we're collecting, all of it is built so that by 2029, when we do issue that debenture and we start paying off the loan, no further tax increases will be required. And this covers the operations of the facility, as well as making sure we're investing enough in our asset management for the building to be self-sustainable throughout its life cycle.
Okay.
And also the debt payments will be covered by those allocations as well.
Councillor Lorrain?
So should I breach the big elephant in the room being Bill 23 that was passed, and what impact does that have on the development charge aspect that we discussed a few minutes ago, if any?
Do you want to deal with that now or further along in the presentation?
I make a mention of it in the additional risks at the end of the presentation, but I don't mind addressing it now. We've done a lot of work to analyze all the financial implications of Bill 23. There will be implications to our DC revenues. Those are considered when we're working on this, and I don't expect them to have a major impact on our capacity to keep moving forward with this. One of the important notes as well is for DCs, we do index yearly, so every year our revenues do increase slightly. In 2029, when we issue debentures, if we do go with IO, they tend to have a fixed term over 20 years or 25 years. That annual payment will not increase during the next 20 to 25 years, whereas our revenues
Will
increase and our debt capacity will increase as well.
Thank you.
Councillor Lalonde?
Yeah, just as far as then the question of interest rates and inflation, and those stories out there that depending on who you speak to as experts say it's going to get better much sooner than expected, or we don't know. So as far as that goes, and building that into, if you're assuming, or if you're quite certain that Bill 23 is not going to have a significant impact on DC charges, or at least you don't believe it will, what about if inflation should continue, or interest rates should stay where they are, the effect of which could be a slowdown in construction? So it's not a Bill 23 thing, it's the fact that builders have decided to go to pre-selling houses only, and we see a slowdown, so we're not getting the opportunity to collect the level of DC charges, even with Bill 23, that we were hoping to get. You got thoughts on that?
Mr. Godin?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so thank you. It is a great question, and so there definitely will always be a certain level of risk. And I think at this point today with this presentation, and a bit kind of like Robert explained too for the different costing options for the different scenarios, we're using the best numbers that we have available today. We did, not that we're building in cushions, but we've used in our financial plan the top end of those ranges just to be more on the safe side, to be able to respond to inflation and whatnot. I also think that over the past years, and we're going to continue to do so, the township's been through a lot of a boom in growth. that could slow down. But I think we've made some prudent decisions to invest in certain reserves, to not right away spend all of that growth, invest in our infrastructure to make sure we're keeping up with those needs that are created from that growth. I think with all that fiscal responsibility built into our yearly budgets and different financial plans, I'm comfortable with the numbers we're showing to you today, but there definitely will always be that risk. And of course, when we're going to see more updated costings, when we get to the 30%, the 60%, and the 90%, we will still have those discussions internally, as well as the tender amount, which is essentially going to be that final number that we won't know before we get there.
I think I'll just add to that as well is that at the UCPR, we did have the Hempson report that forecasted growth over the next 20, 30 years. And they do put in that growth plan that there will be a slowdown, but we are quite aware of that. But also the other fact is that by building this facility, we're actually going to be creating a hype for our community. People are going to want to move here because of this facility. So we actually might slow down the trend of decline by putting this in place. So I think that's something to consider as well. Great. Monsieur Godin, tu peux continuer?
Merci, Monsieur Maire. So this next slide is just kind of to explain what we're going to be doing in the following slides. So I've explained high level what our financial model is, what we're aiming to do, which is to get to 2029 and have the sufficient allocations to be able to continue operating without future tax increases. So with the following slides, for each options, we're going to be evaluating 3 criteria just to see or to identify if those options are feasible. The first thing is we want to make sure that by 2029 we do have those necessary tax allocation or DC revenue to be able to finance the long-term debts. And you'll notice I only talked about long-term debt here, but there's also the operations, the asset management, everything that comes with it. The goal is really to be able to continue as of that year without future tax increases. Secondly, we want to make sure we're respecting our policies, our municipal debt management policy. So we're looking at each option. We're looking at the amount that we have to borrow to ensure that we do fit into that 15% of net revenues as far as annual payments go for the debt. And lastly, and I don't think I explained this one in details, but for the short-term financing needs, so when I was talking about those first 5 years, when we're going to be getting a construction loan versus a long-term debt, we are limited in how much IO was comfortable to tell us that we could actually borrow for the construction of the project. So that limit was $75 million based on our last discussions with them. That's a number that could increase as our revenues increase yearly and we have more discussions with them. But we wanted to use a number that we were comfortable with, which was essentially today's capacity that as calculated by IO. So like I said, for all of the options, I'll be looking at those 3 criteria just to make sure that they all pass before saying a project is actually feasible.
Yeah. So and not that I want to cut it you off, but we're going into version 1, the base program. For efficiency, is there anybody here who's interested in going with version 1 at 108 million? Because if not, maybe we can just move to version 2 and version 3. Everybody's okay going to version 2, and it'll save you a few slides.
I appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. All right, so if we jump into version 2 then, which would be the optimized plus the gym. This would be the version that was prepared by MGMA for what essentially fits into the budget that we had established last year. So you'll notice what we're presenting here. We're presenting the cost and the financing. So for the capital cost, as per MGMA, these are the numbers that you've seen in the previous presentation. Those are the construction costs. There will be additional costs to consider that need to be also satisfied by a financial plan. I spoke of the construction loan, which is essentially kind of like a line of credit. Those are going to generate significant interest costs. We're adding for this option here, we're adding $7 million in interest costs for those 5 years. We have consultant fees that so 2 contracts. We have the PM contract and the design contract that council's already approved. And there will be some direct or indirect costs as well for roading and a roundabout to be able to access the facility that once based on previous traffic studies that were done. So all in all, for the $75 million, or so for the optimized plus gym option, we're looking at a total of $93 million in costs that have to be financed.
Question, Councillor Tarnowski?
Just a
And-
quick question. The Rec Complex Reserve Fund doesn't change, right? I think there's a $405K difference between the version 1 and the version 2. And it might just be a typo, but I just wanted to be sure that it's not intended to change.
Yeah, so through you, Mr. Mayor, so actually it will change slightly. There will be
Okay.
minimal changes. And the explanation for that is, like I said earlier, we also want to be able to finance the operations. So with the different options, they're each going to have different costs of operations with different programming. And as of year 2026, we do have to start funding those. So there is a bit of a reallocation done there, which will kind of decrease the reserve fund.
Okay, Councillor Deakin, then Councillor Lalonde.
Yeah, just a bit of a change of pace here. I'm looking at the other costs, including roads and roundabout. I'm just wondering, especially while the consultants are here, is where does parking fall into the plan and the way that we're looking at the numbers? Because I've seen quite a change in the parking design, and I'm just curious how that comes into play, if that's part of that other costs or if that's somewhere else.
Monsieur Godin, Marc?
So just to address the comment about parking, it's the parking that we're showing in those diagrams is kind of like the building we're showing. We're saying there's going to be parking, but we don't know how many spots. Usually that has to do with a study with the bylaw and with individual municipalities, all of which are quite different. Parking is included in the per square foot price that we have proposed for this facility. But road work, roundabouts, that is not in the scope of the $600 a square foot.
Okay, good. Councillor Lalonde?
So, and I guess in the other version we'll look at, I'm just wanting to understand in the capital cost, what amount of contingency is built into that? We had a separate report that dealt with that issue, but in your own sketch, let's call it a sketch, I'm just wanting to know at this point, what is the amount of contingency, the level of contingency being built into this, starting with this price tag?
So it's worth noting that the presentation did propose a range of from 580 to 625. And that range was based on actual market costs, which would no longer have a contingency applied to them. So in our minds, that range actually accounts for a contingency. So at this early stage, I would say that if you're willing to accept that we're somewhere between 580 and 625 a square foot, that your construction contingency, you can look at that number and include it in that number. But of course, as we move further into the detailed design, you would want to set a percentage of construction value to be a construction contingency, and it would be independent from the costing of the building.
Okay. Other questions at this point in time, or? Tu peux continuer, Monsieur Godin?
Merci, Monsieur Mayor. So as we can see in the slide, I'll kind of just focus on two elements of it. After the $93 million, after we've used our reserves, we do have a remaining loan amount of $53 million. So that's that number that's going to vary from option to option, and that we're going to be really analyzing to see if we're able to sustain that. So for a $53 million loan here, we're looking at annual debt payments of about $4.1 million.
Okay. But just to confirm, we have access to 5.4.
Yeah, that's correct. So, and in the next slide, I'll be showing exactly if it passes the test for the three criteria that I've mentioned. Like I said, the first measure that we're looking at is, do we have the cash flow or the yearly allocations to be able to make those debt payments? And as you can see here, we do have, by 2029, we will have sufficient tax allocation in DCs to be able to make those payments. As far as our debt capacity goes, so is that annual payment over or under our limitations? It is under, so we are respecting our 15% of net revenues, which means obviously we're also respecting that provincial limit of 25%. And as far as the interim financing, so when we're looking at the cash flow for the construction costs, and we're looking at that 2026 year where we'll be paying that last invoice and we'll still be collecting to be able to finance the project. We'll have a financing need of about $61 million, so which is well within the $75 million that IO was prepared to say we would qualify for. Any questions on that side before we move on?
No, I think we're good on that one.
And so we're going to be moving on to version 3, optimized plus ring plus a third pad. So the capital cost that we've used for this version here is $87.8 million, which is along the top end of that range. Again, construction loan costs, this is the interest that we're going to have to be paying over that 5-year, the construction period, and that 5-year where we're going to be interim financing. We are looking at $9 million in interest costs during that period. Again, the consultant fees and the roading don't change from version to version, for a total of about $108 million for this version here, including all the costs associated. So to be able to finance this project, we're looking at a loan of just under $68 million, which would generate annual debt payments of $5.2 million as of 2029.
Question, Councillor Lalonde?
Just on the subject of what we touched on earlier with the skill sets required to manage the facility, and I'm just thinking now with the pool and new positions and the resources. I mean, I know that's not going to be a huge part of the cost, but are the resources that are expected to be needed to run the complex with the positions that don't exist today, are they taken into account as well? Have you done any?
Mr. Godet?
Through Ms. Mayor. So all our cost estimates do include the full operations of it, so additional staff. This is mainly based on documentation and analysis done when we had contracted colliers to work on cost estimates. They are based on square footage, so we were able to adjust those to match this current financial plan with the updated options. There will definitely need to be more analysis done as we move forward with this project based on the actual programming and the staffing need. I don't know if Madame wants to touch on that more, but at a very high level, we are looking at the costs that were estimated, and as well as the revenues we're expecting to be able to generate.
Madame Guitard, quelque chose à ajouter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. Yeah, these questions did come in about 2 years ago when we were working with colliers, and when we got some cost estimates done by Hanscom. We did get some operational numbers, but like Mr. Godin said, it was, high level. And yes, definitely you will need some new expertise. And if I can maybe reassure council, the township is part of the ORF organization, which is Ontario Recreation Facilities Association, who offers a very large variety of courses. They operate from the University of Guelph. And have already had started discussions with the consultant, like Mr. Downing mentioned, depending on what expertise the future staff will need. So we already started looking into that. Because like you probably all know that when we open the door of the recreation complex, maybe in 4 years, there's a lot of programming questions that will have been dealt way before opening the doors.
Councillor Tarnowski and then Conseiller Larry.
A couple of questions pertaining to the amortization on on all these scenarios. I know we haven't talked about scenario one, but it was mitigated. The issue was mitigated with a 40-year loan, I think. And I just want to confirm for scenarios 2 and 3, are we dealing with a 25 or a 20-year amortization? And what's your recommendation? I know when I bought my house 25 years, I felt pretty comfortable doing that. Your thoughts?
Mr. Godin?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, so that's a great question, and a great point of clarity as well. So all of these options are based in the initial financial plan on a 20-year loan. So as much version 1, 2, and 3 is a 20-year loan. When you say 40 years for version 1, that's essentially what we would have to change from the plan. So we would have to deviate from that 20 years, go to 40 years to have those smaller debt payments. We would definitely not recommend that. Our recommendation, we have those, the terms are identified, or there are guidelines for terms in our municipal debt policy. It says two things. There's a list of different types of projects with different length of terms. For a recreational facility, it does recommend 20 years. In that same policy, it also says that as a guideline, we should never be we should never have a term that's more than 70% of the useful life of the asset. So in this case here, for the 25 years, and as you'll see and as you've seen, it is what we are recommending to do. That's still well within what we're expecting to be 70% of the useful life of the facility, hopefully. If it's managed properly, if we plan accordingly, and the facility should be used 60 years plus. So we are very comfortable with the 25 years. I would still, the plan was built on 20 years, and that would have been my initial recommendation to follow our guidelines. But our policy definitely does allow for flexibility on terms when it is judged appropriate, and it wouldn't require an exemption to the policy to do so.
Okay. Follow up, and then Councillor Hilaire.
Thank you. Just a quick question on our policy. Was that policy established before our asset management policy? And does that make a difference in the sense that, if I get a 25-year mortgage, but I'm putting money aside to replace my roof when it's due and so on, I feel more comfortable about saying 25 years than 20. Was that the case?
That's a great question. And they were, I can't honestly recall which one was adopted first, but they were prepared in
Conjunction?
Yeah, exactly, parallelly. And there was actually mention in our municipal debt policy about asset management where it should be kind of an automatic that when we do issue debt and we finish paying off the debt, that payment would be transferred afterwards to asset management. And that's what kind of allows us to have certain flexibility as far as investing a bit less into asset management during those first 20 to 25 years to then increase our contributions to our asset management reserves once we're done paying off that debt, which also correlates with those first 10 to 20 years. You're going to have a lot less capital investments to make into that building. So we're quite comfortable with how they work together.
Thank you. Councillor Hilaire.
And if I'm not mistaken, if I am, please correct me, but with the new facility and the increased programming based on an additional rink, the swimming pool, the efficiencies of having everything in one center versus having multiple facilities, that should help us offset cost of expertise and staff that are going to be required to operate the facility. Am I reading that correctly?
Yeah, there's an operational savings to have everything together, correct?
Yeah, absolutely.
Plus the increased revenues that would also offset that.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions at this point? Non? Peut continuer, Monsieur Godin.
Merci, Monsieur Maire. So as far as the results go for, excuse me, for version 3 optimized plus third pad, we do see that for 2 of those criteria, we don't pass the test. So essentially what that means, for the first one, are we able to make those debt payments? What we're showing here, sorry,
Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. I could have waited till the end. But why is number 1 not a check mark when you suggested we had 5.4 million in payments? This is, and the costing in this previous slide says 5.2. Wouldn't we not then have enough without an increase 245,000?
through
Councillor
Ms. Mayor.
Gunning?
So I believe this would be related to the kind of the same answer I
The
provided.
20 year to the
Councillor Tarnowski.
25?
No, that's not exactly it. It's, the response I gave earlier to Councillor Tarnowski, where depending on the programming, there might be different operational costs and different operational needs. Regarding that $3.3 million, it's not just for debt payment. It's also to make sure that we can maintain our asset management and the operations. So although we do have a tax plus DC allocation of about 5.4 million, we still have to satisfy the operational costs. So we can't just allocate it all towards the debt payments.
So, for example, this option here, we're looking at a third rink, which probably has more operational costs than a gymnasium. So there's a difference in that calculation. Councillor Deakin, you had a question?
Yeah, I guess just building on that, when I first read that, I understood it to mean that it had an X because it's not within our current limits of just
Yep.
looking for,
Mr. Gooding?
our 15%, for example. Yeah.
Yeah. So through Ms. Mayor, I'm just going to go through those 3 points and then just to explain. So you are correct. The first X, what it means is we don't have the necessary tax allocation and DC allocation to be able to make those debt payments. So we are short $245,000 when we're following the financial plan as established for a 20-year loan. So there's the first obstacle for this option. The second point, which you also see a red X, is because the actual debt that we need to issue. So it does go a bit over our debt capacity. So it does go over that 15% of net revenues for our annual payments. It's actually at about 16.4%. I am a strong advocate of respecting our municipal debt policy and to maintain that 15%. One of the risks that I will be mentioning later on is by doing a significant debt like this, we are limiting our flexibility moving forward if there are other major projects or emergencies where we need to have a significant investment that we can afford. So we do need to keep that cushion, if you will, for our debt capacity. So in this instance here, it doesn't pass the test because we are over by 1.4%,
Right.
at 16.4.
But the next slide addresses that issue.
That's correct. And for the third test, what we do, it's tight, but we are within our interim financing needs. And there's a simple solution to if we do want to address that, if it does become too tight or if we do reach a limit, we can always issue debenture a year early or there is kind of a flexibility built into this plan where we can adjust regarding market situations or other obstacles. So yes, the next slide I will show how this option could be feasible, what measures we would need to take to be able to make it so. So like we saw in the previous slides, there was two criteria that weren't kind of respected. This can be addressed with one simple solution, is to increase our debt, our long-term debt from 20 years to 25 years. What that will do is two things. Well, it's going to do one thing, which is going to address both items. So it will reduce our debt payments, our annual debt payments. So we'll be doing them over 25 years, so those debt payments do reduce a little bit. We are, and I'm also indicating here to slightly increase our asset management contributions during that loan period. Because we'll be doing it for 25 years, there's a 5-year period there where we're not going to be increasing that investment into our asset management. So we're increasing over that 25-year period the investments that we do make in our reserves. And this doesn't require any additional tax increases.
Right.
It's with our current plan, we're still able to do this just by increasing to 25 years.
Right. So those two previous red X's turn into green check marks by doing this.
That's exactly it. And I do want to caution council, and I do mention it here, that doing this, there's a reason we would recommend 20 years. So we will have about $3.6 million in additional interest costs. But again, it's not going to impact, it's actually going to be a lesser payment because it's over a longer period. And it slightly goes against the guidelines that I mentioned earlier from our municipal debt policy of a 20-year loan for a recreational facility. By adding an additional 5 years, which is the administration's position that that's still a reasonable compromise if council chooses to go forward with this option.
Okay. We're good. Keep her going.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So these final two slides, essentially I wanted to also provide council with some additional risks to consider. And the final slide will just be additional potential revenue sources that haven't been considered into the financial plan. So for the additional risk factors to consider, like I said it a bit earlier on, debt capacity debt is an important tool that we have access to when in need, be it to move forward with major projects like this one or others, or to react or to deal with infrastructure needs that were maybe unforeseen. So by making a significant increase or a significant investment into a project like this, we are putting ourselves kind of against our internal debt capacity. And the example I show here is for the recommended solution of a 25-year loan for version 3. When we do issue that loan, we will our borrowing capacity within our 15% net revenue will allow us to borrow maybe an additional 1.1 million. That's how close we'll be to our borrowing, to our self-imposed limits. For the provincial limits, we will still have a $52 million cushion, if you will, so that would allow us to be able to address emergencies if they were to come up.
Yeah. Just to clarify on that point, we'll hit that 1.1 million the first year of the loan, but as we make payments year after year, the cushion will grow again.
So the cushion will grow, not as we make payments necessarily, but as our revenues increase. So our net revenue, so 25% of or 15% of our net revenues will increase year over year.
Right.
Currently, it's increasing at a rate of about 5%.
Yeah.
So yes, so that $1.1 million would be maybe
1.6,
1.3
right.
after year
Right,
year 3.
the 25%.
It will keep growing.
I'm just thinking in my mind back to the graph chart from a previous presentation where it showed we just touched the tip and then we were okay.
That's exactly it.
Okay.
Other risks that some we've touched on and some not. So the growth, I mean, like I said earlier on, we've seen a lot of growth in the last 3 to 4 years. That's helped us with this plan. We're able to, I don't want to say easily, but it's not too much of a challenge to allocate $150,000 in extra tax revenues to this plan based on the amount of growth that does come into the township year over year. There is always a risk that the economy will slow down and that growth will not be as aggressive as it was in the past years.
Right. Councillor Lorrain?
Yeah, and that's, I mean, I'm not flipping ahead to the next slide yet, but one of the options that we would have for us, which is something that we did this past year when the growth was incrementally higher than what we thought it was at budget time, we allocated an additional $75,000 to that growth component, to that $150,000, in an effort to try and maybe alleviate one of these concerns and maybe stay within the 20 year rather than the 25. Could be that we continue to maintain that $75,000 above for the next 3 years, and that gets you your $245,000 that you need at the end of the line. So we could maximize on the growth over the next 3 years and increase that amount if growth is there for that time period. Correct?
Yeah, Mr. Godet?
Yeah, through Mr. Mayor. So that's a great point, and that correlates with what I said earlier, when saying that doing fiscally responsible decisions and recommendations, when we do see that high growth, it is when we do have a significant project like this, we would be recommending to do those transfers.
Right, because as you mentioned, this year we had an extra unanticipated growth of I think it was 115 or 20,000. We put $36,000 for the splash pad, which means there's 36,000 yearly going towards that project. And you know, once that project is built and paid for, that's another $36,000 that could be going towards the rec complex. So we definitely have some flexibility in that sense.
Definitely. So just to keep going with that list of risks, so we talked about Bill 23. There are impacts. So there definitely are financial implications of Bill 23. Like I said, they are estimated high level from our team, and we did build this into the plan, and we're still comfortable with that revenue that we've identified at $2.1 million a year. But it's definitely something we keep on monitoring to make sure it doesn't have too much of a negative impact. Another risk would be for high inflation to continue. I mean, we'll see when we get to the 30, 60, 90%, as well as tender for the construction costs. But inflation and interest rates are always volatile and hard to predict. So we're keeping an eye on that as well. And just regarding difficulties in predicting future market demands and interest rates. So like I said, there's a lot of variables in a plan. But we're comfortable that the numbers that are presented reflect a realistic vision of what's to come.
Okay, thank you very much. Question, Councillor Tarnowski? You can wait till the end. Let's look at the last one. Potential sources of income. That's always a good one to look at.
Right. So exactly. So there are risks, like we said, we saw in the previous slides. There's also potential sources of income on which we haven't had in-depth discussions, so we didn't presume to include them in a financial plan. But depending on what we decide to do with the existing arenas, there could be additional costs if we need to demolish or whatnot. But there could also be revenues from sales or to any other potential solution for those. If they are to be sold, and if it was to be development, either commercial or residential or whatnot, there could be a potential for additional taxation coming in from those from that activity. Growth reserve fund. So again, that comes back to how to manage peak growth periods responsibly. When we do have higher growth than normal, increase our investments into our reserves to be able to properly deal with when that growth is going to slow down. So we do have some mitigation measures here to be prepared for those the slowdown in the economy if it does come around. And there's also advertising and sponsorship opportunities for sure with a facility of this nature.
Yeah. And of course, there's always it's not written here, but the grant potential if we're able to get the outside. Yeah.
Yep, that's correct. That's another potential.
Okay. Question, Councillor Tarnowski, and then Conseiller Lalonde.
Merci. Excellent presentation. Thank you very much. I would really like us to have. I'm happy moving in this direction. It's a little bit above my comfort level in terms of how I like to manage my finances risk-wise. Not that I deal in millions like that, but I would like to have like an exit strategy that we can start thinking about. And not that I want to go there, but I'd like to have it prepared. And I would like to maybe see a version 4 where we have the 2 rinks, pool, hall, and kitchen. And the rationale for it is that I just need a better, and again, it would be more like an exit strategy, but if I look at the difference in DC charges between a 2 and a 3, it was always told to us that, no, we'd lose all the DC charges, but I really only see a difference of $572,000 of DC charges that we can use between 2 and 3 rinks. So I'd like to confirm that. And the other thing around the rinks that I would also like to know more in terms of as we move forward in the planning, we talk about the value of our existing rinks, i.e. we can sell them. And I think that obviously that makes sense. But I'm not clear. I think in Embrun we can sell the land to a developer and develop something. But I'm not sure that we have that flexibility in Russell given that we only own a specific amount of space. So I would like us to be able to maybe quantify somewhat those options, like what are they worth down the road if we need to look at that. I would feel more comfortable knowing that, let's say, that piece of land in Embrun is worth $3 million, it's worth $500,000, and or in Russell, what can we do with that? Because if we aren't able to develop that piece of land because we don't own around it, then maybe it's better as a rink right now, and so therefore is that strategy of 2 rinks not a bad strategy after all. So again, I'm comfortable in moving in this direction, but as we get closer and get better numbers, I just want to have some comfort in understanding some potential exit strategies or pivot strategies, to use a overly used term. Thank you.
Thank you. Monsieur Godin, Madame Guittard, comments?
Merci, Monsieur Maire. Just if I can start, I think Madame Guittard might have something to add. I think it's a very good idea to have that exit strategy. And as we move forward with a specific option, that will be the next step in our development of the financial plan, is to really look at, okay, all the ifs and what are the different options to manage them. So I'm happy you're raising your specific points. We've taken note of them, and we'll be sure to include those specific items in that strategy.
Madame Guittard, quelque chose à ajouter?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of council. So in fact, for the evaluation, that was done last year for the Embrun Marina. So we could definitely bring this back to council along with the evaluation of the Russell Arena.
Yeah.
There's definitely a difference in the value, of course, because we do own the land in Embrun, and in Russell we own about 10 feet around the building. But still, the building could be sold, or for another vocation or something like that.
Yeah,
So
I think that is, it's proper planning to have a report back to council at some point to say, what are we doing with the existing facilities? We will have 3-4 years to discuss those options and how we move forward. That's ample time to figure out what our best options are.
And if I just may add on this, if council remember, I did get the grant from FCM to get the condition assessments done on both buildings. So this will be coming, I think Mr. Godin and his team were working on a tender to have a consultant bid on that work to be done. So I'm not sure where that process is, but they were working towards that.
Yeah. Okay, perfect. Other Conseiller Lorrain, and then Councillor Lalonde.
You know what? I'll let Councillor Lalonde.
Thank you. Yeah, and Céline, I'm glad to hear that. I think that's a real important piece, that assessment of, to hope that we might have a good option here in the case that it's needed. I know Councillor Tarnowski said exit strategy. I mean, it's a good option strategy, certainly to consider if we even have to go there. And so I certainly support the idea of seeing what that fourth option might look like. And just as an aside to that, the grants, I imagine, I hope, I would think, could be significant in amount now that we're on the edge of going forward, and they would have the opportunity in the grant process to see that now this thing just shifted gears, that we could get a sense of how much money that could be, which could be significant.
Yeah, I think that'll be the nice part about being in the design phase and having something concrete to present to the provincial and federal government to say, look, this is where we're going. In the past we did apply, but it was sort of up in the air. This is nice. We'd like to get money, but this is, look, we're going. We need, your help, and, how we approach it at that point in time, that'll be a discussion for council to know whether we pay down the debt on the existing building or we decide to add a component that we didn't put in, and we'll have that flexibility with our MP and MPP say, well, we can't do this component, but we can do this component, and, so we'll have some flexibility there. So I think it's very important that, we'll have a good foundation, try and move forward with grants. Obviously, we haven't necessarily been super successful in the past. We have gotten some, but I keep hearing that Ontario is open for business and they want things moving forward. I'm just happy, and I have to congratulate Mr. Godin and your team for bringing us a plan that is sustainable at the local level, that we can move forward on our own if need be. And I think that being realistic and living within our means is something that's very, very important when we talk about the size of this project. Because let's be clear, it's going to be the biggest municipal project this municipality has ever seen. So, Conseiller Lorrain?
Yeah. I'm gonna also add not just the administration for that plan, but also the previous council for having thought and worked with staff on that plan and had the vision to include the financing plan, operational capital, all together and actually put it down in motion and set that plan in place. I think that was a key contributing factor to where we are today. And again, like we said, can be done at the municipal level based on everything that we just looked at. The only thing I'm going to add to Councillor Tarnowski and Councillor Lalonde's comments there are, if we're going to get the, call it an exit strategy or whatnot, with a version of a project with two rinks, and what we can do with the other rink, I'm assuming we're keeping one of the other two rinks open under that scenario. So there are 3 rinks in the municipality. That we also need to see the operational cost increase. And, you know, obviously we're going to get the lifespan of that facility and how much more that this is going to put onto that project. Because I'm not holding any secrets here. I've always been a proponent of consolidating the rinks and having 3 rinks in one location. I think that's still the best planning option possible, which is why I'm supporting the recommendation tonight based on that. So we also need as part of that information coming back to us, what are the limitations in any contract the township has with the Ag Society for the actual property, if any, right? We need to know, we need to understand what those are. So whether we're keeping the facility, which is not my favorite option in terms of as an arena, or whether or not we can repurpose it ourselves, or whether there is a potential for sale. So I think all of that needs to be put in place. But again, I think we should be moving forward with the optimized plus rink 3. I think that makes the most sense to me. We've got the finance plan in place. We could even tweak it a little bit based on the growth factor, so that we don't have to go outside of our comfort zone from the 20 to the 25 year, and we can also look at whether or not that increases our revenue stream to allow us to get under our debt capacity limit too. So there's different options there. So I think that, we should be looking at that going forward.
Thank you very much.
That's where I'm going to be sitting tonight on that.
Yeah. Councillor Deakin?
I'm just looking at the next step slide from the consultants that they shared, and I just wanted to double check every time that there will be a cost that comes forward. I see one. When is
I think
that?
it's March is the next one.
End of February, March. Every time that happens, can we expect the administration to also be providing an update with how things are shifting as we go?
Monsieur Godet, that's the plan?
Through you, Ms. Mayor, yes, we can definitely include an update every time we do come back to council with this file.
So just to circle back, then I'm seeing at least 3 of those before we go to tender. Am I reading that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Thank you.
Conseiller Lorrain?
Yeah, just for Councillor Deakin and Councillor Lalonde, I think when we had the sports dome built, I think we had 3 or 4 of these types of discussion, 10%, 30%, 60%, 80%, 90%. Like at every time there were all these decisions coming back to us. So that's exactly how it'll work. And obviously with this scale, it's so much more important to have those numbers in front of us as many times as possible.
Yeah. Councillor Tarnowski?
Merci. I would also request, if at all possible, that by the time we kind of move forward with this, I would like to have a better understanding of the opportunity around the 3P kind of project, where we can bring in some private, support, like companies want to sponsor or whatever. If there is a way to kind of, put some sort of value on that, to have an understanding of what we can potentially expect down the road, that's something we should start looking at now that we're starting to have some better idea of what we're getting. So on the ACDEV side, see what value that would bring.
So just, if I can just clarify that. So when you're talking about 3P, you mentioned sponsorship. Are we talking about a sponsorship opportunity? Or are we talking about 3P as into construction of the building?
Well, certainly we haven't talked about that, but
Right.
the 3P being like private money coming in, whether it's sponsorship, whether they, naming is one thing at a basic level, but whether there is opportunity, obviously we haven't, like if that's an opportunity, I think that's kind of that ship has sailed, unless I'm wrong.
Well, that's why I just want to clarify, because normally 3P, we're talking about private-public
so-
partnerships in construction projects. So I don't think we want to go there, because normally that's for projects that the municipality could not do it on its own, but we already know that we can do it on our own.
Yeah, I would just hate to close the door if something was to come up. I'm just saying. But in terms of sponsorship, whatever that opportunity is, I would like to put a value on that as we move forward, as we get closer, as we go through the next iteration of this costing process. And then in terms of this great plan that we're looking at, I'm concerned because, and I know we're specifically talking about the rec complex, but we also have a project of a library refurbishment that's a couple of $1 million that's going to have an impact on some finances as well. So I just want to make sure that we don't lose track of that, because I think that's an important project, and I want to make sure that we still have a bit of capacity to take care of that.
I think, Mr. Godin, correct me if I'm wrong, but we have the DCs for
Right.
that project, correct? Or we will have by the time we get this.
That's correct. So a major component of the financial plan for the library is DCs. There will be also a non-DC component, but we are definitely looking at that when we look at the overall picture.
Right. Okay. Councillor Deacon, and then Conseiller Lalonde.
Yeah, I'm just wondering about the chit-chat about having a request for interest from private companies, private businesses that might want to operate out of the rec complex, and if this is something that we're looking at, does this still form part of the plan that we're looking to approve tonight, or just wondering where that's at?
Thank you, Mr. Godin. Madame Guittard, if I remember well, the common areas has some flexibility in regards to if we have some common areas could be rental space as well. So if a private business wanted to move forward, but that's discussions that are ongoing with, we did do a survey or an RFO.
Well, we did a formal request for interest. We had a few people interested, few businesses. So we were planning to do another one maybe early spring to seek out the interest, because we'll be going maybe after the 30% of the design. So we do have common space planned in the recreation complex. So depending
What interest we
on the
get?
results, that's it. Because we, to be honest, we only had one local interest.
Follow up?
Just a follow-up question is, do we have any sense of how much square footage we would have in those common spaces for
No,
these
there
types
was
of
no
opportunities?
defined
Okay.
dimensions of the space, if you want.
Thank you.
Speaking of requests for interest, I'm just going to throw this out there. When I see 3-pad, I think tournaments. I think the other thing is, where are these people going to stay? We have no hotel or motel in our municipality. We have a considerable amount of land next to this complex. I just want to throw it out there, and maybe it's something that we give direction to the administration, come back later, but do we give direction that let's go out for a request for interest with the hotel industry to see would they be interested in setting up shop next to this complex? Because we do have land there, and, negotiation is a wonderful thing. My favorite game as a kid was Monopoly. Let's make a deal and see how we can bring that type of industry into our community. Councillor Lorrain?
I think that's a wonderful idea. And, to create a hub for recreation like that with a facility, I've been to many different tournaments, and I know that there's an example, I think it's in J Peak, is a good example, where you park your car at the hotel and it's you walking all around to the locations. Well, imagine that there, right? Different partnerships with down the road with the phase 2 of that area being the baseball diamonds, and what that could look like as well, where you've got baseball tournaments, summer hockey, then you got the winter all year round, the utilization of that area, and then think about the fact that there's right across the street and just down the road a little bit, there's commercial going in there, you know, restaurants, grocery stores, other things like that that can go in there. So I think the sooner we get on top of a partnership with a chain or a location for that, and seeing whether or not there's that ability to build in that area, I think that would be fantastic, as long as we could put it there, and what that would look like from a zoning perspective and all that stuff, and how we maneuver around that. But that's how I envision the whole process right from the get-go. And I think once we purchased all that additional land there, I think that's now opened the door for that possibility. So I think I would fully support that idea.
And again, it's a request for interest, right? There might be no interest, you know, but why not put it out there at seed? Doesn't cost us anything. Councillor Tarnowski?
So just to confirm, so I used to do feasibility studies as part of the course we taught. So typically they look for about 60% occupancy to survive a hotel. So we wouldn't have that here. We don't have a big enough market. Even if the place is full every weekend with hockey tournaments, that would be a challenge. I think what we should look at and expand is our multi-use properties that are being built now. So they're half residential, half hotel, and those might draw some interest, or a retirement complex halfway and some rooms like that. But otherwise, there's not much that'll draw. But as you say, it doesn't cost anything. But I think if we're going to go down that route, we need to be open to, you know, possible some residential there or something like that.
Yeah. Well, we do, I believe, Madame Tremblay is not here this evening, but I believe we did do a hotel market study. So that, you know, sharing that with the plan, putting it out there and seeing where it goes. Conseiller Larrey?
Yeah, I believe that study did support a hotel in the area. So I think that's absolutely something that we should be moving on, and to time it with the construction of this facility just makes sense, right? I mean, we're from today, we're what, 3 years out from essentially opening, right? If I'm playing with the numbers a bit, but you know, that doesn't mean you can't have that construction done in that time frame as well. So.
Yeah. So let's, if council's in agreement, giving just that direction to see. Let's go fishing. Councillor Lalonde?
Thanks. I just wanted to thank Richard. I think, you know, we put you through the screws tonight and asked a lot of questions, and I was pleased with the answers that were given and the amount of detail that went with it. And but I just want to pick up on Councillor Tarnowski's point of earlier about wondering, you know, wanting to make sure that there's enough money for the library. Something we all know is long overdue and highly anticipated, and I want to just expand on that. And you know, after providing all the great answers that you did and showing the good work that you've done, the due diligence I think is there to. It's that infrastructure in general, you know, the existing infrastructure, the road work, all those things, you know. The comments I've heard is there's no question we need what's being proposed tonight. Everybody wants this. I haven't heard anyone who doesn't, especially the pool piece. The concern is, are we going to be able to do all the other things, you know, the tedious, you know, relentless amount of ongoing maintenance, effective maintenance program, as we used to call it on the ships, you know. So I don't ask you to reiterate that you think you have the plan for that. I just leave you with that being, you know, we need to do the things that are being talked about tonight, but we also need very much not to lose step with, obviously, the library, but more so the infrastructure. So, and one last comment on the, you know, we talk about possibility of a hotel or just the facility being run so well and getting so busy. We'll just have to remember that when it comes to parking spaces, because we could be victims of our own success if we don't have enough of it. If you have the tournaments and all the rest of it, it really does look like something that's going to be very exciting, bring people from outside our region, but that parking is going to become an integral part of the design, to say the least.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Alain, last comment?
Yeah, just the last comment, and that's exactly why that's why the development charges are split the way they are, for recreation purposes. It doesn't affect the other projects. That's why the financing plan was specific to the 1% and the growth factor, so that we don't have to touch on the other needs of the municipality. So great point there, and just I have faith in the administration to tell us when we're overstepping and keeping us in line, and I think they've done an amazing job. So, thank you.
Thank you very much. Any final words from the administration?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So not on my end, but I'll let Madam Daw, if she has anything else to add.
No?
No, thank you for all those good questions. I think, and I'm happy that I think we were able to answer all of them. And I thank the consultants also tonight. So maybe, Mr. Mayor, if you could maybe suspend the rules or whatever procedure, could we have maybe the question period for this presentation so that maybe the consultants could leave after this session?
So I'm okay with that request.
Okay.
But first, we're going to take a 5-minute break.
Okay. Okay.
And then we will be back, and then council will be able to address that question.
Okay. Thank you.
Welcome back, everyone. At this point in time, as suggested by Madame Guittard, I think it's a good idea that we suspend the rules of procedure and allow for a question period on this item only. So I need a mover and a seconder to do that. Moved by Councillor Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Deacon. Everyone in favor? Perfect. So we will now open the question period for this specific item. If you want to please come up to the lectern and state your name and address for the record and ask your question.
Eric Greer, Embrun LaPointe. I really like the idea of the multi-use or some element of hospitality. I've come across many people, and just myself as well, having issues finding places for people to stay, family members, especially during the holidays, if they don't live in and around the township or even from the province.
Just need a question.
But the question I have is, if you're going to be canvassing in that regards, would it also be possible to canvass for healthcare facilities, the idea of having maybe a clinic or some practices of some sort by the sportsplex? I think the proximity would also be very helpful in some regards. So
Yep.
that's my question.
Thank you very much. I think the administration is currently working on a healthcare potential, so that might be something to look at and bring back at that point in time. Conseiller Lorrain?
Yeah, I know there's multiple facilities and newer facilities, like I'll use Richcraft as an example. They have a physiotherapy on site. They have Titan Performance, like things like that, which could go in the common space area. So I think the question is valid. I think that staff will definitely research that as well. And if that's the best thing to go in there, then absolutely. Or, whether it's I know AMPT has their own facility, but is there another type of program like that would want to infiltrate this area and utilize some of that extra time and space on the ice as well? So
Yeah, and I think, we will be, obviously we might be limited in the amount of common space that we have, but council could always prioritize what type of industry we want there. Obviously, if it's a healthcare initiative, it might be better than somebody who's just, providing some service, but so we'll have some flexibility in deciding what do we really want in our community. Ancien conseiller Brisson, plus proche du micro, s'il vous plaît.
Will there be some places for classes? Because I know with my girls, whenever they were for lifeguard, they needed some classes to go in, so it was just something to make sure that it was not forgotten, even if some common space was deleted, cram everything, trying to save some space.
Yep.
And the other question is for Mr. J'ai pas compris comment ça allait aider notre finance quand tu dis qu'on augmentait notre contribution à la gestion des actifs dans les présentations. Comment ça augmente? Parce que si t'en as plus, t'en as moins.
So, Monsieur Godin?
Oui, through you, Mr. Mayor. Donc oui, augmenter les contributions à la gestion de l'immobilisation, c'est pas pour aider avec le plan financier. Ça n'aide pas, tu as raison, ça fait le contraire en fait. Mais en extensionnant de 20 à 25 ans, la réduction du paiement nous permet de quand même rester à l'intérieur de nos mesures puis d'augmenter la contribution à asset management. Puis la raison qu'on veut le faire, l'augmentation à asset management, c'est que, comme j'expliquais, pendant la période de l'emprunt, on en donne moins. Puis là, si la période d'emprunt est plus longue, ça fait qu'on en donne encore moins. Donc, on veut augmenter le montant annuel qu'on investit.
C'est juste pour réduire un petit peu le montant. Après 20 ans, if we had paid it off in 20 years, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, l'argent du paiement irait vers gestion l'aménagement. Mais à cause qu'on ça va aller contre le paiement, il augmente un petit peu l'asset management.
C'est pas vraiment une manière d'aider le paiement pour notre capacité de financement. C'est pour ça qu'on ne l'a pas aidé. Dans les autres présentations qu'il a faites aussi, il n'y a pas, oui, le don, on vient à bout de faire de l'argent avec, mais je pense pas que j'ai jamais vu un aréna qui est payante ou une piscine qui est payante. Donc, on va avoir plus de services, donc les coûts vont augmenter. Donc, votre capacité d'endettement va-t-il diminuer? Parce que là, nos coûts en augmentant, c'est parce que c'est sur les revenus nets et non bruts.
Through you, Ms. Mayor. Non, en fait, c'est le contraire. Notre capacité d'emprunt va augmenter parce qu'on n'aura pas le choix d'augmenter nos revenus pour pouvoir supporter ces coûts-là. Quand on parle de revenus nets, on ne parle pas de enlever les... C'est pas la différence entre les revenus et les dépenses. C'est vraiment les revenus nets, la façon que la province le calcule. Il enlève certaines composantes de revenus qu'on a dans nos états financiers, qui ne sont pas des revenus fixes et stables. Donc, il enlève ça du calcul pour pas qu'on se fie sur ces revenus-là. Comme des octrois, par exemple. Si on a un gros octroi pour un certain projet, ça ne compterait pas dans nos revenus nets. Donc, non, pour répondre à ta question, le fait d'avoir des coûts supplémentaires à supporter, ça va en effet augmenter notre capacité d'emprunt parce qu'on va devoir augmenter nos revenus pour les supporter.
C'est ça que je pensais, mais j'ai dit j'avais mieux clarifié parce que quand j'ai vu le revenu net, c'est pour ça que là, ça va être... Mon autre question, c'est pour Mme Guitard. Quand il y a eu l'évaluation qu'il va y avoir pour l'évaluation de l'aréna qu'il y a eu, c'était-tu juste la bâtisse ou juste faire ceux qui avaient considéré comme tout le terrain jusqu'à rue Saint-Jean-Baptiste et Blais, là, que ça fait une différence dedans?
Oui. Madame Guittard?
Merci, Monsieur le maire, membre du conseil. Oui, l'évaluation a été faite pour le terrain et pour la bâtisse.
Parfait. Merci.
Yes. You were trying to do your best to have some passes.
Perfect. Parfait. Merci beaucoup.
Bruce Murphy, 129 Pioneer. Quickly, when you talked about adding a hotel feature and everything else, I think, and you talked about mixed-use development, an important part to keep in consideration would be affordable housing, considering where we're at in this stage. So if you're building a hotel or apartments, affordable housing would be a decent spot if that could be considered in that aspect.
Yeah, so just to be clear, I'm not saying we're building a hotel.
No.
I'm waiting to see but again, any affordable housing, if an organization, non-for-profit, came up and said they're interested in building, well, we can definitely have those discussions here, whether it's that location or other potential locations. But yeah, I think
Could it be included in the request for information as a... or request for interest, sorry?
Request for interest. I'll let that up to the administration to come back when when they're ready to go to have that in a report, make that distinction.
Okay. And then a follow-up question, probably more directed to Madame Guittard, but when you guys did the initial concept plans and we did all kinds of community engagement and requests for what sort of features and programs needed to be included, one of the major components was basketball.
Yep.
I don't know anything about the basketball program personally. I'm not
Yep.
not in it. That's not my realm. But I know it is big and it's a big movement, a big part of this township. And the version that we're going with from all points and interests seem to be cutting out the basketball gym portion for this phase.
Yep.
Does Recreation have a plan for, okay, so now we're not doing that, so the next plans, because we also talked about selling our arenas and whatnot. So, okay, so Plan B, we're not including basketball in this phase of this new development, but is there an opportunity to put it in the Russell Arena and convert that into something, because we know it's not an overly ideal
So
place to
that would be part of the report that'll come in the future of what are the realm of possibilities for existing buildings. So is that a possibility? Definitely. I mean, we're going to be voting on the option that was presented. I do want to mention that we have 9 schools in our township, and they all have a gym. And most of these organizations get free use of their gym from the schools. So, you know, we know that it's a $7 million expense on our end. But no, I mean, we have 4 years to figure out what we're doing with those existing buildings and whether we want to go that route or not. Madame Guital?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. If I may add also, we are working a little partnership with the Basketball Association for the outdoor basketball course that we built at the Jonathan Petrie Park. So that's a start.
Okay, but so there is a long-term plan, because the other question is, like, these facilities are great for a lot of people, but it's more high-end, so the lower funded organizations have less access to some of these amenities. And so is there consideration for lower income accessibility to recreation when we're putting all our funds in a large
So
complex like
we
this?
have multiple facilities, and every facility has different costing in regards to what their space rental is, and their school programs. I mean, from a municipal perspective, if I look at our programs, I think that many of our programs would be considered to be cheaper than the private industry that's out there already. So it's, you know, so yeah, definitely. I mean, that's all part of a whole recreation concept, but that's not for this meeting here in the weeds. That's down the road.
Okay, so how is township moving forward with a recreation facility while putting the recreation planning, or I forget the exact words you use, but the big scope, and pushing it to the future, but making a commitment of $88 million on a recreation facility without having that plan sort of in place? Or did I misinterpret you, Mr. Mayor? Sorry.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. Maybe Mr. Fawnin, maybe you can add for clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So there is a recreation plan which includes a variety of elements of the recreation capacity of the township that exists now.
Yeah.
This is but one of them. That plan gets reviewed every number of years. I don't know exactly what year it's up for review, but there is one in place now. The recreation complex under discussion is with regard to those capacities that we were most short of. And as the mayor indicated, as Mr. Mayor indicates, we have a number of schools which provide access as well to recreation capacity for residents as well. So, short answer, there is currently a plan. It exists. When it's up for review, I don't know, but maybe Madame Guitar could speak to that very quickly.
Perhaps I'll just add, if there's an aspect of recreation we don't have right now that you think we should have, then I would say come back next week at our budget session and make that public budget request to say, I would like to see this considered in the budget. And then we'll be able to have a discussion and say, is it something we're willing to go there or not go there?
I guess my question was more of a, how do we determine which ones are more appropriate without having that recent review of our recreation study, and where we're determining that a community hall is more important than a gym, or a bowling alley,
Yeah.
or the third arena is more important than an
Yeah.
8-lane pool, without having a refresh.
I think that's
without delaying the project.
Yeah,
but
I
without
think
having a
I
refresh.
think that's why council sits at this table, and that's why we have administration. We've had those discussions over the last number of years, and it's up to council to make that decision. So I can say, based on all the conversations I've had for numerous years, that this seems to fit most in line with the public. You know, based on all the previous public sessions that we've had, you know, that's the answer I can give you. Councillor Larrain?
Yeah, I just wanted to point out to one piece. I think it's a couple of things that you said before, but you know, in terms of the accessibility to our, and I'll use the rinks as an example, because affordability, you know, we do provide all the schools in our township with access to the ice at no charge. We do provide public skating and shinny and all that at no charge to the public. So we do ensure we encourage utilization of our facilities at no cost, which a lot of other areas and municipalities charge for. So we have acknowledged that need in our community years ago, and we ensured that we continue to offer that, and I'm assuming we will continue to offer those types of things at our new facility.
Yeah, I just comment that I fully agree. Our township does a fantastic job of promoting access to recreation and moving forward. I do agree with the phase 3 plan or version 3 of the plan in general and the direction you're headed. It's just questions I wanted to raise to get answers to. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next question.
Brittany Hughes, 28 LaPointe, Embrun. Just a question, because I might have missed it, and I apologize if I did. There was a lot of information. Right now, as you know, there's a fitness facility inside the dome, and I was just wondering if a expansion or a cordoned-off fitness facility was considered for the rec complex, given its multi-use for different sports and fitness gym facilities, or is it something that'll just expand once the pickleball court's kind of removed from the dome?
So in regards to, I don't think there's any consideration to remove the gym, the fitness gym from the dome at this point in time.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of council, no, I don't think so.
Okay.
For now, the gym stays in the dome.
Yep.
Yeah, so I just meant like with regards to the sportsplex itself, it wasn't considered as something to be put within one of the multi-use spaces in the.
No.
Okay,
No.
that makes sense. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. Any further questions? Hearing, seeing none, Madame Cabinet-Laflamme, we will remove this item to vote on it separately. With that, to our consultants, thank you very much for the presentation, and I look forward to seeing you guys again. And I think that, this is going to be a jewel in our community, and thank you for being there to guide us in this adventure. With that, item B a été enlevé. Item C, règlement pour emprunt temporaire, rapport FS 30-2022, que le Conseil reçoive le rapport FS 30-2022 daté du 5 décembre 2022 et adopte le règlement d'emprunt temporaire. This is pretty standard stuff we do every year. Any questions, comments, members of council? Anything to add, Monsieur Godet? No.
Excuse-moi, no.
Yeah, okay, just making sure. Item D, speed limit reduction on St. Joseph Road, report ISPW 18-2022. That council received report ISPW 18-2022 dated December 5th, 2022, and adjust the 50-kilometer sign to reflect the urban boundary. Monsieur Bourgon, I think the only reason this is coming forward because there's an actual petition, but we've been doing this along a certain amount of our roads in the recent years.
Merci, Monsieur Mayor. So exactly, that's an operational adjustment to reflect the real boundaries of the urban boundaries. So exactly, so since we did receive a petition, I want to bring that forward to council for information.
Okay, any questions or comments on this one? Seeing, hearing none. Item E, Fonds pour le transport actif, rapport PR 2022, que le Conseil reçoive le rapport PR 2022 daté du 5 décembre 2022 et adopte et appuie les fonds reçus pour la somme de 64 500 pour le programme de fonds pour le transport actif du ministre des Affaires intergouvernementales, de l'infrastructure et des collectivités et autorise la greffière et le maire à exécuter l'entente au nom de la municipalité de Russell. Questions, comments on this one? Councillor Deacon?
Yeah, I was just wondering how it was determined to put the bike lane on Hamilton Road. Was that due to timing? Was it due to volume? How was that decided? Thank you.
That, if I remember well, correct me if I'm wrong, Madame Guitar, Monsieur Bourgon, that was part of our cycling plan. It was a loop that was created when the cycling plan was created. I think it was 2017, something like that.
I think so. I can't
Yeah,
remember.
that was a while ago.
I will
But
say always last year, but no, it's
yeah,
like 5 years
but
ago.
the cycling plan
Cycling
is
plan.
it was actually when we the fitness trail, when we expanded it all the way to the end of Force Road, or not Force Road,
200.
from Force to the other end. We wanted to create a loop where they could just go down Hamilton Road and come back. Councillor Lorrain?
Are we looking at any type of barriers down that side, whether they're bollards or something to protect the cyclist if we're enhancing that ability for them to ride down that way?
Monsieur Bourgon?
Mr. Mayor, at this time, no, but we'll have to monitor that stretch to maybe bring back something to council.
Is that stretch a 50-kilometer zone?
It is.
Only up to the houses of, like, backing from the Old Town project.
okay.
Then it
It
gets to
goes,
80
it's like the
kilometers.
boundaries of, like, the other locations, right? Boundary of the road.
So I know we're not at our budget meeting on Monday night, but I did get that request from a couple of residents on Hamilton Road saying if we're encouraging people to go down that way on the bicycles or on the cycling, that there should be some sort of bollard system or some sort of protection there, so.
Okay. Mr. Fawnin?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've lived in a number of cities in Canada, and I know that some cities and towns put bollards up. When you do that, you incur extra infrastructure and servicing requirements because you now change the ability to clear those roads and clean them with the existing equipment, and you need to bring on specialized equipment. So there's a few factors to consider. If I understand that path that's there now, it's considerably quite wide. I think it's 5 feet. I stand to be corrected, which is enough almost for 2 bicycles side by each. So before we would want to study that to see if it's practical and what the cost we would incur in doing that. I understand the point of residence. I do a lot of cycling myself. We'd have to analyze the need.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions or comments? Hearing, seeing none, we'll move on to the next item. Notice of amendments to procedural bylaw 2021-127, CL 12-2022. The council received report CL 2022 dated December 5th, 2022 as notice regarding proposed amendments to council's procedural bylaw 2021-127 and authorize the clerk to bring forward the amending bylaw for consideration by council at its next regular council meeting on December 19th. So this is just a notice. There's no discussion this evening, but I believe in your report, Madame Camille-Laflamme, if members of council have other suggestions for changes to procedural bylaw, to email them to you. Is that correct?
Yes. Hi, Mr. Mayor and council members. You're correct. So if you have any changes to add or different than these in the chart, to send it to me by Monday, December 12th. And this way we can prepare for discussion and the bylaw at the next meeting on December 19th.
OK, parfait. Merci beaucoup. Prochain item, G, révision des comités non statutaires du Conseil, rapport CAO 16-2022. Que le Conseil reçoive le rapport CAO 16-2022 daté du 5 décembre 2022 à des fins d'information et d'approbation concernant un certain nombre de comités non statutaires et pour renforcer la responsabilité des comités pour la révision des certains mandats et l'ajout d'indicateurs de performance clés ainsi qu'une description des rôles des membres des comités. Questions, comments, members of council on this one? Councillor Tarnowski?
I think I raised the concern already. I just think that some of the KPIs may adversely affect the raison d'être for some of these committees. So I have concerns around that. And I'm going to be asking to pull this.
Okay. Separate that item. Mr. Fawnin, did you want to speak to the report at all?
Just to, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to highlight the purpose of the review was to bring a little bit more focus and accountability to some of the non-statutory committees. We had indicated that from the review that some of the committees, although they were great for providing some feedback on certain program activities and suggestions, there may be a requirement to provide a little bit more accountability at the committee level. The idea of putting in key performance indicators specifically was to help the committees focus efforts and be able to measure their results, both in terms of the simple work that they produce and bring things to council, but hopefully also to add. I would suggest also that in producing this and then going out and recruiting for these committees and getting them established, the hope is in fact that they will help to develop more of their own indicators which provide better indications of success on the way. So I look at this as a starting point to get the committees going and then see what they produce from there.
Okay, thank you very much. Other questions, comments? Well, we'll move on to the next item. Item 12, from reports from investigator and the ombudsman, we have none. Item 13, notice motions, we have none. Item 14, question period and meeting on the day. So if somebody has a question on something that wasn't the complex, then come on up. Oui, pousse le bouton.
Ah, OK.
So,
Je suis plus habitué avec ceux-là.
oui, so, les questions ici, puis les envoyer à la bonne personne.
1076 Saint-Pierre. C'est justement pour G, qui vient de discuter. C'est la vue un peu comme que le conseiller Tarnowski a parlé. Je trouve que mettre un ICP dessus les comités pour dire, ah ben, selon le nom, comme...
Question?
Oui, excuse, je reviens. Je veux dire, pourquoi l'avoir mis? Parce que ça ne va pas faire baisser, puis ça ne va pas faire juste encombrer plus le conseil, parce que là, tu encourages les comités, ah ben, il faut que tu fasses des petites résolutions, même si ça n'a pas rapport, ou tu sais, ça n'a pas... Envoie des résolutions pour que ça paraisse bien, puis tu en aies bien, pour que le conseil le passe. Ça ne va pas faire juste plus, puis le but ne sera pas plus que le conseil, notre job, ben, votre job à ce temps, que ça serait le conseil qui devrait envoyer plus de questions au comité pour qu'il soit dealé, pour que quand ça revienne au conseil, que des fois tu as plus d'informations d'un public général. C'est juste ça, je trouve une chose...
Oui, c'est un bon point. Définitivement, le conseil, quand il y a des questions qu'ils peuvent envoyer au comité, ils peuvent définitivement envoyer la conversation au comité pour avoir une recommandation. Le but de ça ici, c'est pour faire certain qu'il y a des recommandations. Le rôle du comité, parce que si tu as un membre du comité, in my opinion, si tu as un membre du comité, on va dire un membre du conseil qui siège sur un comité, puis il y a des discussions à la table, puis il n'y a rien qui vient au conseil, le conseil ne sont pas au courant de ces discussions-là. Au moins, de cette façon ici, quand il y a des... Tu sais, si on veut que nos comités aident le conseil à faire des décisions, il faut qu'il y ait une recommandation, il faut qu'il y ait quelque chose qui vienne. Tu sais, je ne dis pas juste faire des recommandations for the sake of making a recommendation. I think that it's important that they are engaged, that they are looking at issues, and they are bringing things forward. Because if they're not bringing things forward for council's consideration, they can might as well have a committee meeting in a Tim Hortons and have a conversation and not be an official committee. You know, we want this to be a public representation where members of the committee and members of the public have a way to engage and send something to council for council's consideration, in my opinion. Councillor Lalonde? No. Councillor Tarnowski?
Mr. Mayor, so you just brought up a good point. We can't just, based on how many recommendations come, but one of the KPIs, certainly in some of the committees that I saw, is the number of recommendations and resolution brought before council.
So let's not get into the debate. The item has been separated. We'll discuss it at that time. Thank you. Oops. With that, we'll move on to the next items, resolutions. Motion that council approve all recommendations. Yeah, if there's another question, please come up to the lectern.
Sorry, just to focus back on traffic calming. So I emailed earlier yourself, Mr. Mayor, and Mr. Bergeron, and got excellent information back from you guys. But that information is not accessible to the public. And so if residents have a concern with what they want to do, and you guys already have a fantastic plan in place that needs a little bit of improvement, but it's a great start, but in my mind needs a little bit of improvement. Is there not a way that we can put that on the website accessible? Like, we have your plan for what roads are being paved in the next year. Can we not put this traffic calming up
Policy?
on the website?
Yep, we can definitely look. I thought that's where I found it was on the website, but
Well,
It's already on the website.
Well,
yeah,
you
it's
sent-
on.
Mr. Mayor, you sent me like a 400-page document and told me to go to page 260. I don't consider that accessible.
Yeah, well, that's just the link I had at hand at that time because I have them all saved. But no, we can confirm that it's on our website and make sure that's available for the residents.
And so is is the only way to make amendments to the next, to the rest of the traffic calming is to come at the budget meeting next month?
No, if you have,
Monday, or is that-
what I would suggest, if you have suggested changes to to any policy that we have, you can send those to a member of council, and the member of council can flip it to the administration, and the administration can have a look at those.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments? With that, we will move to the resolution section. Motion that council approve all recommendations listed on the agenda under item 11, reports from department and council committees. I need a mover and seconder to put on the floor. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Lalonde. And we had two items we wanted to remove, Madame Caméré-Laflamme. Item A.
And G.
So need a mover and a seconder to remove item A and G, moved by Conseiller Deacon, seconded by Councillor Tarnowski. We're okay with removing A and G. I'll call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? A and G is removed. I'll vote, all those in favor voting on everything except A and G. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. So now we will swing back to item A. Recreation Complex Conceptual Design Presentation Report PR 19-2022. That council received report PR 19-2022 dated December 5th, 2022, and approved the conceptual plan of V3 Optimized plus Rink 3, which includes 3 rinks, a 6-lane pool, a community hall, and common areas, estimated at a cost between $82.3 million and $88.8 million. Need a mover and a seconder to put on the floor. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Tarnowski. Further questions, comments, discussions on this one? Nope. If, with that, we'll call for a registered vote, Madame Caméré-Laflamme. So first registered vote, guys. So we start at our left, and you state if you're in favor or opposed.
I'm in favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor.
In favor. It's unanimous. Thank you very much, everyone. Item G, item G, and is the council received report CAO 16-2022, dated December 5th, 2022, for information and endorsement purposes in regard to a number of non-statutory committees and to enhance committee accountability with the revision of certain terms of reference and the addition of key performance indicators, as well as a description of committee member roles. So I need a mover and a seconder put on the floor. Moved by Councillor Tarnowski, seconded by Councillor Lorrain. Questions, comments? Amendments? Councillor Tarnowski?
So comments. Again, I'm just perturbed a little bit with some of the KPIs, and I understand there should be some accountability. But I think the value of these committees, and having sat on both as a resident and as a councillor now on these committees, I feel that we're somehow kind of, I'm not sure what the right term to use here, but we're trying to put in a process where something that I feel is going to take away from it. So I can only use from my personal examples based on my experience having been on the PRAC as a resident and having been on the PRAC as its chair. When I look at recommendations like KPIs, like the number of recommendations and resolution brought before council during the calendar year as a KPI, that means that it gets measured against something else. And so if I look at that one, am I going to be pushing to get more recommendations? I mean, we got great recommendations from the PRAC committee this past mandate, but I'm worried that we're going to look for resolutions or recommendations just to get them. If I go down the KPIs, the number of specific program activities initiated as a result of the advisory committee recommendations. That one's not bad. But again, that's going to be limited every year. It's not going to be something that, last year you did 2, this year you only did 3. This committee's not working. Or actually, the wrong order of numbers there. But the number of new recreational and cultural facilities developed as a result of the advisory committee advocacy, direct engagement during the calendar year. I mean, I've been on council for 4 years now, and I've been a member of the committee. I don't think we actually ever developed one recreational cultural facility. We may have been involved in discussing them and making recommendations, but the committee could never develop those. So I'm concerned about some of them. I think they need to be hashed out a little bit more. And I think, I applaud the direction that we're going with that and wanting to get a little more structure around the committees. But I feel that this first attempt needs a little bit more hashing out in order to get what I think we should be looking for. And for that reason, at this stage, I'm not comfortable in voting in favor. So I'm going to vote against it, but I'm explaining to you why.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Fawnin, anything to add?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Yeah, yes, it's, valid points to raise. Because of your experience, and I'm sure other members of council have this experience in their day lives as well. The purpose of indicators is to assess and measure, and the old expression, you can't manage it if you can't measure it. I said once to a committee I was working on in my old job, if there's a God in heaven, please don't let this be about counting stuff, right? So the idea of collecting information to count it is not as valuable as the impact of the indicator. So the idea of initiating a process to develop indicators, of which I certainly couldn't speak to what would be the most valuable indicators for any particular committee. But the intent here was to initiate the concept of including indicators at committee level. I would certainly encourage committees subsequently to develop indicators which evaluate the success of their program activity as committee members. Because the committees, I do believe, I assess that the committees do need to have a certain level of accountability and a product, something that they produce for residents. It starts with, unfortunately, it often starts with basic counting. How much of something did you do? It goes down to, okay, of that something that you did so much of, what did it mean? What impact did it have? That's the intent. Perhaps I wasn't clear enough in the documentation, but I don't feel at this stage that I can go into any great depth, and I wouldn't want to dictate the exact types of indicators for each committee. I think the committees themselves have to come to the conclusion, but they need to understand that there needs to be more accountability than just the number of times they meet. In fact, even the number of meetings itself is an indicator of productivity. But it's what results from the deliberations committees and what they bring to council and what council accepts and what benefits the community overall. That was the intent of the document.
Okay. Thank you very much. Conseiller Lorraine, then Councillor Tarnowski.
Would it make sense to add in the term, in maybe the terms of reference, that the committees or these committees are tasked to determine KPIs for that committee within the first 2 years of the term of council, so that we can, for this initial term of council, because we just redid everything, and they come back to us. Like, these are great to start just as a mechanism to track something, but that the committee is tasked, maybe as, if I'm looking at the Seniors Advisory Committee, just as an example, because it's the one on my screen, it would be proposed term of reference number 5, that the committee be tasked with developing KPIs within the first 2 years of the formation of that committee. And then they present it back to staff and council for formal approval, so that going forward into the last 2 years and into the next term, that we have proper KPIs based on the people that are there doing it. And I think, and then I'll just circle back with, I think KPIs are an absolute important thing to do, specifically when council last term almost had to send stuff to certain committees to get stuff back, rather than them coming to us with some items. So I think it's important to do this, and I think that may be a compromise to some of the concerns that Councillor Tarnowski had.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tarnowski?
I like that direction, and I think maybe for the first kick at the cat, I would be comfortable in having the KPIs rather than listed KPIs here, but have KPIs that are developed by the committee within, and I wouldn't say 2 years. I would be comfortable saying, within the first 6 months of the committee, as committee members get to know each other, and then present those KPIs to council for acceptance, and then moving forward, keep those KPIs, or at every council or at every new council, maybe review the KPIs, because I just feel that different committees will have different KPIs, and it's very, I'm just cognizant. The train station's a perfect example. This is something that's one item that took, probably about 15 different engagements with the community, and so that in itself tells me it's an awesome project. We've got a grassroots movement of residents getting involved, but that's one facility, and I would hate that we just put that all on one facility and maybe 3 recommendations that came from PRAC. So I would sooner like the committee with the staff and whoever the council member is on that particular committee to be tasked with perhaps reviewing these or coming up with some, and within 6 months recommending KPIs. I would be a lot more comfortable than having them dictated to us. They still have to go through an approval process to make sure that they hold, that they're worth it. But I would feel more comfortable that way. So I would be happy to propose an amendment in that.
Okay. Councillor Deakin, then Councillor Lorrain.
I was thinking the same direction. I would support that sort of an amendment. And I was just trying to think about ourselves 4 years from now, looking at the committees and saying what worked, what didn't work. And I'm just wondering, at the end of the day, you take that information in, does it help you to determine the composition of the next committee? Are you talking with staff liaisons? I mean, you mentioned in here the committee roles a little bit, but in terms of who's ultimately responsible for delivering on those KPIs that hopefully the committees will be setting themselves. I'm just trying to figure out in my mind how that's going to work out 4 years hence.
Mr. Fonan?
Mr. Mayor, so I also mentioned at the end of the report the specific role accountabilities of the chair and the staff representative, and I think at times I have heard anecdotally that there at times has been some confusion over not only who's the boss of the committee, but who coordinates and who has a voice and what level of voice that is. Again, what indicators, and I take the point, I've lived with indicators for about the last decade in different iterations. Indicators are only that. They're only a way to start you off in a conversation, but they help focus the mind. So at the end of an evaluation period, if you want to call it that, you're looking at the indicators as you've drilled down. And indicators are often, there's only a few of them listed here. They're a cascading idea. So you have an indicator that starts you off with a number of things. But again, the number's not the important thing. You could have one report go to council that could be seminal and germane to the future development of this community beyond all imagination. Right, so that's a good thing. Only one indicator, only one tickie on the box. That's not the point. The point is to have indicators that point you towards that direction, as opposed to sometimes with the groups that I worked on, task force and such, where they sit around wondering what they've done, and it just becomes a matter of, well, we've had this many meetings, we've produced this many reports. That's fine, but what did you do? What was the result? So at the end of the 4 years, I would expect the indicators would be looked at in aggregate, and hopefully, in addition to the indicators, there's anecdotal information regarding evaluative mechanisms that you use to decide how do we describe our success. And in the end, that's the final sentence you ask yourself. Can I describe success? That gets listed out in the form of indicators along the way. And at the end, the question is, you were or you were not. Obviously, council would be the responsible venue to evaluate the success of a committee, because they would be evaluating whether those committees brought to them initiatives and projects which meant something to residents. That can be assisted obviously by administration, but that's how that cycle goes. And in the end, you've got either a committee which was productive, and you will have some committees, I imagine, that will be more productive than other committees for a variety of reasons. You'll have some committees that will have limited production, but that production will be outstanding because they'll do something truly significant. We talked also previously about the concept of, instead of having some of these committees, to have task force. So have an issue, convene a group, convene a committee effectively for a short-term requirement, produce a result, propose that result to council, and then be disbanded as an issue base. We didn't go that route for this purpose because we wanted to give some of the committees another mandate because of COVID primarily, so some of the committees weren't able to get really off the ground. So that's kind of the broad purpose of it.
Okay, thank you very much. Councillor Lorrain, then Councillor Deakin.
Yeah, I just, touching back to Councillor Czernoski's point, I'm not gonna say yes or no to the timeline. I mean, I only said 2 years so that the committees had time to absorb what their roles and responsibilities were and how things came to them within 6 months. I don't know if they're gonna fully grasp everything that is required of them or what type of stuff is gonna come to them. depending on the different, whether or not they've been on that committee before, or or how much stuff actually gets to them in that 6-month period. So that's why I was suggesting within the first 2 years, not after 2 years. But I mean, if we want 6 months, I'm fine with 6 months. But that's why I was suggesting the time frame. They may not have fully absorbed what was going on if they're new to the committee. So.
Okay. Thank you very much, Councillor Deacon.
Yeah, just to loop back to the 4 years hence comment and question. Would it then be the councillors that would be planning in 4 years' time to, as chairs of different committees, to be producing these reports that we would report back to council at the end of the 4 years in terms of those KPIs that the committees would have assigned or would determine themselves? Or would it be, I guess it would be as it winds down, we're baking into that process that the committee does that self-review. I'm just trying to get clarity on that.
Mr. Fonan?
Mr. Mayor, it would be the committee. So the committee, under the guidance, obviously, of the chair, with support from the staff and the committee members, to produce a report that illustrates. I think along the way, however, one would hope that a committee, through its lifespan, is productive and produces things along the way. Whether there's a need for a final report for a committee, that remains to be seen and determined by council if they desire to have that. But along the way, there'd be initiatives brought forward, and that would become fairly self-evident. A final report, a closeout report of a committee, absolutely definitely has validity. It would be produced, I imagine, by the committee itself.
Follow up.
It would strike me that might be a good thing to include within the terms of reference as well.
Yeah. So may I suggest at this point in time that Mr. Fonan has heard the conversation, heard the comments. Perhaps we just do a motion to defer and bring this back. No need to vote on it, whether it's a yea or nay this evening. So if that's the case, then I'll need a mover and a seconder to defer this item. Councillor Chernowski, Conseiller Lorrain. Mr. Fonan, would you prefer bringing back in 2 weeks, or you'll be bringing back in January?
Mr. Mayor, I probably should say January at this stage because we're in the middle of budget cycle.
Yeah, okay. So motion to defer to the first meeting in January. Okay. With that, all those in favor of deferring? Opposed? Carried. Item 16, bylaws. Motion that council approve bylaws 2022-129 to 2022-131 because 132 was removed inclusively for first, second, and third reading as listed on the agenda. Need a mover and a seconder, please. Moved by Conseiller Lorrain, seconded by Councillor Chernowski. Any questions, comments? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item 17, rapport d'affaires nouveau. Il n'y a pas. Item 18, rapport divers présenté par les membres du conseil. 18A, Councillor Lorrain, snow removal and salting.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. So I had received a phone call from, or a voicemail from a local resident. I shared it with staff regarding after the first snowfall that we had a couple weeks ago. And it touched on the salting and snow removal of not just major arteries, but secondary roads and subdivisions. So I'd asked, when I got the information, I shared it with council just as an information, but, from a public perception and clarity for everybody, can you just describe the information that was being requested and in regards to how we clear our roads and salt and all that stuff?
Monsieur Bourgon?
Mr. Masso, question was also regarding what type of policy do we have in place for snow removal and salting. So the municipality, we do follow our minimum maintenance standard, which is the regulation imposed by the province. So we do monitor our weather 4 times a day. We do have a patrol that are patrolling our roads daily and even at night. And when it comes to a snowfall event, well, again, we're following the regulation to determine when do we go out, and every type of street has a ranking from class, for us it's class 3 to class 6, and there's a different standard for each one. The 5 centimeter mark was established for our parking ban that was in place, that we had to put in place during the month of November since the overnight parking was not in effect. So we did emphasize more on our 5 centimeters. Now that our parking ban through nighttime is now in effect, well, we'll be a bit less. It could be 4 centimeters, 3.5, so it won't be as much strict. The reason is for the parking ban. For a small rural street, our guys cannot plow or cannot drive through when there's too many cars parked on the side of the street. So that's why we had to establish that 5 centimeter mark, which now if we're at 4 or 4.5, well, our crews will be out in snow removal and salting.
Because
throughout the municipality.
Because now in effect the parking ban's in effect. So it's only for the month of November and the month of March.
And March. And also I need to add that if there's side street that are not being plowed since we receive 2 centimeters, it creates a snowpack that still falls or still fine under the regulation. If there's formation of ice, then we need to intervene and go and apply salt. So that's why we always have the patrol on the road and doing those monitoring of our streets daily.
Okay. Conseiller Lorrain?
And if residents happen to witness something that the patrol hasn't either come yet or whatnot, the public still have that ability to make a phone call and say, hey, you may want to come and look at this. There may be some issues in this area, and then we would go by with our road crew and take a look, and if there needs to be intervention, then they would absolutely intervene at that time.
Yeah, exactly. You're correct. Councillor Lorrain, our road patrol will go and assess complaints. During a snowstorm, we can do a quick check as well on our GPS system to determine if the plow went by or not during the snow event.
And just for clarification for me, the minimum standards are provincial standard, but in many instances, we're actually above the minimum standard, correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. We call it that because that's the way the province has called it, but we're actually providing a better level of service than what is required from the province. Okay, thank you. Councillor Deakin?
Merci. I just was wondering about the salting in particular and understanding that you're kind of monitoring it to decide whether to go out or not. Is there any sort of temperature, any specific condition, or is it really just a gut feel what they're seeing here and there? I had the opposite. I had a resident concerned about too much salt, which is
we're
also,
not county
yeah.
roads, we're municipal.
Sorry, say that again?
Just a joke. We're not county roads, we're municipal roads. Monsieur Bourgon?
Oh, sorry, did I say county?
No, sorry. We're monitoring the
Where do I work?
weather is is the main thing, and as well the pavement temperature. That's another variable. If it's sunny or not. So those are all things that are being monitored throughout the day to determine if salt needs to be applied. Or we do follow the ice storm, if I can say it that way as well. If there starts to be a ice formation on the road, we need to act immediately. So those are all things, and that applies for sidewalks as well. We're mentioning roads, but does apply for sidewalk as well, same type of standards.
Follow-up?
Just a follow-up question, that balance between how much salt to put on, are you looking at other regulations, environmental regulations to balance?
We do need to
where does the buck
report
stop there?
our salt, I'll say salt consumption, for lack of a better word. Every vehicle or every snowplow, we do have an application rate that are set on the truck, so we can monitor the usage of salt per vehicle. So there's different settings depending on the width of the road. If you're in an intersection, you can what we call a blast, so you can actually send out more salt during a short period of time. So yeah, there's different. All those variables are being calculated or monitored throughout the season.
Okay. Further questions, comments? No? Thank you very much. Prochain item 19, consultation publique. Il n'y a pas. Item 20, announcements. Anybody got announcements they'd like to share? No, we're good. In that case, item 21, motion to move into closed session at the hour of 9:15 p.m. to address matters pertaining to Section 239 of the Municipal Act, 2001, SO 2001, Chapter 25, to consider matters relating to, 1, negotiations with CSDCAO and CDSBAO verbal report under Section 2K, a position plan, procedure, criteria, or instruction to be applied to any negotiations carried on or to be carried on by or on behalf of the municipality or local board. 2, request for consideration, verbal report under Section 2B, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees. 3, closed session minutes of regular council special meeting dated August 15, 2022, and closed session minutes of the special council meeting dated September 8th, 2022. Need a mover and a closer, mover and a seconder to go into closed session. Moved by Councillor Tanoski, seconded by Conseiller Larin. All those in favor? Opposed? We are now in closed session. Thank you very much, everyone.